Yo, Atlas speaking, and welcome back to the Atlas Fanfic channel. Today I'm back with part 3 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as a Prodigy Uzumaki. Let's not waste your time and get straight into it. Let the tale begin. Chapter 12, Part 3. It had been 3 days since I last emerged from the basement of the Hokage Tower where the Kyuubi had been sealed inside of me. I spent nearly all that time working on channeling the Kyuubi's strength without killing myself. An ANBU visited 3 times a day and brought me food and occasionally a scroll on the tailed beasts that had been found in the village archives. When I finally left for a day, I traded the embarrassment of almost forgetting Minato's birthday for the embarrassment of being the only person who remembered, including the boy himself. When I walked into the apartment with a present in my hands, I found the 2 genin and the 2 adults leaning over a complicated seal far beyond my comprehension that covered the entire table with paper. Poor Nagato was flopped over one of the mattresses, knotting a length of ninja wire. "Happy birthday, Minato," I said with as much enthusiasm as I could muster. They shushed me and continued in their debate. "They've been being mean for days," Nagato told me wisely. It sounded pathetic coming from the boy. "They won't play with me. Tachan always plays with me." I felt bad because I had been the one to ask them to make the seal. It made me feel even worse when I realized that Nagato wasn't even old enough to go to school, so he had absolutely nothing to do. The walls were drawn on, some of the doodles were pictures, and others resembled crooked kanji while his fingers were stained with ink. He had pushed the mattresses and appeared to have made some sort of game with the blankets and pillows. I was surprised he hadn't wandered out yet, though that might have been because of the combination of the child-proofing seals and the fact he couldn't quite reach the lock above the doorknob. "Hey, kiddo, why don't you and I go out for a big breakfast somewhere and then go to the playground?" "Really?" He jumped up and ran at me, colliding with my knees and not letting go. "Sure, just let me tell them where we'll be so they don't worry. You're the best NII-san ever. You are my NII-san, right? That's what Kachan said when we were in that boring building." Sure, I'll be your NII-san too," I answered as I scribbled down the note and left it on top of Minato's present, then scooped up the impressive pile of mail on the doormat for something to read later. "I know the perfect place to eat. Ready to go?" Nagato ran to the door and pulled on his shoes. I grabbed one of my old jackets hanging in the closet and slipped it on him. It was January and a little cold for a kid. I could use a little bit of medical chakra to warm myself up. I was about to open the door when Nagato reached up to me. "Up?" he asked. I crouched down and he hopped onto my back. "Fly! Fly!" he insisted. I glanced back at the table where the 3 Uzumakis and Minato were bent over the seal. I wanted to pull them out, but Nagato had obviously been bored for days. I have no idea how they forgot about the boy, but he deserved some fun, especially since it was mostly my fault he was being ignored. Once the boy had a secure grip, I leapt to the roof to show him my favorite way to get breakfast in Konoha. Nagato was perfectly happy carrying part of our breakfast and curious as to what I was planning. When we reached the closest market square, I set Nagato on his feet. He immediately grasped my hand and let me pull him through the square to several stands where I bought us assorted fruits and sweets. One thing I did not miss at all from my world was the grocery stores. In the Konoha market, I knew the people who grew my food and I didn't have to worry about choosing the right things. The stands I was most familiar with knew exactly what I wanted and all I had to do was walk up and they would get it ready with a smile and a little small talk. At the stand that always gave me an extra stick of dango for free, I shared my most recent healing escapades or she regaled me with tales of the time she spent as a medic nin before a grouchy IWA nin liberated one of her hands and stole it as a trophy, forcibly retiring the woman. Her daughter made the dango and she sold it. At the cart with the oranges, one of the man's daughters was an aspiring novelist and would run ideas past me and make me promise to buy her book whenever it was published. I liked talking with the civilians because it let me forget about everything ninja and remember what it was like to be a civilian. Nagato wasn't keen on most of the attention, especially from strangers, so I hurried through the market, even though the people I met wanted nothing more than to catch me and beg for news from the shinobi side of the war. I discovered that I had a reasonable fan following as the spirit of the triage, especially among the civilian children. I couldn't say I was surprised. There was no such thing as a decent role model from the shinobi world. As a rule, shinobi exploits were generally looked down upon by civilians. Theft, torture, and murder just never made appropriate bedtime stories. It made sense as to why everyone seemed to want me to wear my haori everywhere. Bringing Nagato to breakfast was a good idea to begin with. There was a small playground near the Uchiha compound everyone except the Uchiha tended to avoid. Because of that, it stayed deserted until well after lunch. Nagato and I enjoyed our morning meal in the grass near the bottom of the middle slide. It wasn't particularly healthy, consisting of mostly sweets and some bread, but it was fun, even though the air was a bit too cold to be comfortable. I pulled out 2 slices of off-season watermelon I managed to buy without Nagato noticing. We had fun as I showed the boy how to spit seeds. I had never been good at it in either life, but Nagato happily picked it up easily enough. When the sun finally reached above the treetops, it started to warm up. At first, there was only 2 clan kids, an Inazuka and a Nara a bit more than a year older than Nagato, whose mothers dared to come so close to the Uchiha compound. They were joined shortly after by 2 Uchiha mothers and 3 other children around the same age, plus an infant. I remained sitting on the grass while Nagato played with the other kids. 5 civilian kids of varied ages and clearly all related dragged a harried, 2-man Jinin team to investigate the ruckus. By the time lunch rolled around, there were 12 children running around the playground, all under the age of 7. Until then, only Nagato ever came within arm's reach of me. Kids were generally taught not to get too close to a shinobi without permission. I amused myself by covertly watching the 2 Jinin who hung uncertainly in the tree line and flipped through the mail. They recognized me, I was sure of it. One had even hidden a bingo book behind his partner's back to check. I noticed one of the letters to be extremely official-looking, and tucked it into my pocket to look at later when I could concentrate. Kushina's clever sealing that had been applied to my kunai pouch had also been applied to my pockets, though it only fit approximately 6 square inches of things. One of the mothers brought a lunch basket filled with food for all the kids, which was unexpectedly kind. The group of mothers somehow wrangled the Jinin into distributing the food. I felt bad for them as the children attacked the 2 boys, but not enough to stand up and help them. It was good training in situational awareness as well as self-control. I didn't move when Nagato plopped himself down in my lap, a sandwich clutched in his hand. 10 minutes later, the entire group was back at play and the Jinin finally found the nerve to approach me, presumably to ask if I was the spirit of the triage. If I was reading the conversation between the mothers properly, they had figured it out a long time ago and now the 2 Jinin were the main topic of conversation, and if I wasn't mistaken, a few bets. With the pretext of bringing me some of the leftovers from the lunch, the older Jinin came over. "Are you on a mission?" he asked as he held out the small sandwiches. "No," I responded curtly. "Then why are you wearing a uniform?" "The Hokage told me to." That was not the answer he was expecting. "Who's the boy you're here with?" "My new little brother." "Why are you here?" He sat down in front of me. His parents are working with my other 2 siblings on a project and he was bored. I made a mental note to compliment the boy's interrogation skills. They were nearly Chunin level, and if I didn't know exactly what information he was after and felt like making him work for it, it would have accomplished its objective very quickly. "Aren't Chunin supposed to dress like civilians when they're off duty?" he asked, the slightest amount of accusation in his voice as he dug dirt out from under his nails with a kunai. He might have looked intimidating if he was about 10 years older with twice the muscle. Clever, He was trying to put me on the defensive and make me want to explain myself. Well, tricks only worked if you fell for them. I already told you, the Hokage, and my sensei, told me to stay in uniform even when I was off duty. Right. He was definitely frustrated. Why did they tell you to stay in uniform? I threw him a bone. It seems to me you've already figured it out when you were going through that bingo book. So, you are the spirit? Never mind, I was going to screw with his head. What are you talking about? Are you the spirit of the triage? What are you talking about? Of course, my scam had to be upended by a stupid kid. One of the kids screamed in pain, followed quickly by one of the women racing towards him. When I finally found the kid, who had fallen while trying to walk on the monkey bars, the woman had already fallen to her knees beside the boy. Don't touch him! I shouted before the mother could pick the boy up. In a second I was on my feet and running to the kid. The mother glared at me while the boy screamed. I'm a medic Nin, I explained. May I give treatment? If she had been a civilian mother, I wouldn't have bothered asking, but considering she was the Inuzuka boy's mother and had a kunai in her hand, I figured it was in my best interests to ask first. Go ahead, she told me and sat back on her heels. Nagato grabbed a fistful of my haori and buried his face in my back. I ignored him and ran 2 fingers down the boy's spine, which was thankfully unharmed, even if he had a depression fracture in his skull from hitting something on the way down. I fixed the boy's head first, trying not to look at the nasty compound fracture in his upper arm. Unlike most medics, I had enough chakra to do full healings, and I didn't care about whether I should or not. I wanted to show off a tiny bit, so I put the bone back into the boy's body using just chakra. Luckily, I remembered to sever the boy's pain receptors in the process, otherwise it might have been much more painful to the ears. When I finished, my head ached just like it always did whenever I had to repair nerves. Nagato clung to one of my legs as the mother held her kid while he cried, even though I knew he wasn't hurt at all. Thank you, she said earnestly. You're welcome, I answered politely and picked up Nagato. A second later, I was mobbed by little children who suddenly thought I was the coolest thing since candy. You are the spirit of the triage. One of the genin accused. Yeah, but, you know. The younger genin interrupted, you're the habanero's brother. What? Well, Kushina never told me about that nickname. You're Uzumaki Kichiro. I want to go to a different park, Nagato murmured in my ear. Well, I had no idea how to respond to the instant celebrity status, so different park it was. I have to go, have a nice day. At that I shunshined out of the park while the mothers giggled quietly at my predicament. I brought Nagato to a playground on the other side of the village. Sorry about that, Nagato-kun, I said as I set the boy down on a less full playground. It's okay, Nisan, you were just helping. They were being mean and screaming about it. You can go play, I'll wait on that bench, okay? Okay. He ran off to make new friends. I sat down on the bench and pulled out the official letter. It was a notice that one of the Uzumaki orphans attending the orphanage had gone missing several weeks before. I put the letter away, perturbed, and forced the issue out of my mind. There was absolutely nothing I could do about that particular problem, though I had a hard time believing that Orochimaru's experiments had started this early. 10 minutes later, a group of academy students came looking for me. What the hell? I didn't sign up for being stalked by children. There he is! One of them shouted. I ran over to Nagato, picked him up and shunshined home as fast as I could. Double deadbolting the door jarred the 4 people obsessing over the seal out of their trances. Nagato ran over to the window and locked it as well. Nisan? What happened? Minato asked. I'm being stalked by children. The genin started laughing. It's not funny. Actually, it is, Kichiro-kun, ISE chuckled. Nagato, back me up. It's not funny, the boy insisted. They were all screaming and running at Nissan and they tried to jump on him and it's funny. Fuso smirked. Anyways, when did you two leave? I left a note and took Nagato out for breakfast. He was bored here. Oh! I'm sorry, Nagato-chan. She cried and scooped the boy into a hug, finally noticing all the evidence of a toddler's boredom around the room. Did you have fun with Kichiro-kun? Nissan's the best. Nagato clapped and started to tell her about everything we did. I peered out of the peephole of the door and was glad to find no one there. And then this boy fell and got hurt really, really bad and Nissan healed him real quick like and it was so cool and before that I was playing with all the other kids and before that Nissan showed me how to spit watermelon seeds. This earned me a disapproving look from Fuso. And he took me to the market and there were so many people but it was a little scary because everyone liked to look at us and I'm really tired right now but I want to have a fun day with Nissan again. Can I? Can I? Please? Please? Of course, you can, Nagato-chan. The boy cheered and leapt out of her arms and ran to me. Nissan, can we do it again tomorrow? Please? 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 Sure, if you want to. Yay! Minato and Kushina were still laughing at me. Faster than anyone in the room could track, I dashed behind them and slapped the back of their heads like Sakumo seemed to enjoy doing to me, then zipped back to my spot by the door. Hey! They shouted indignantly and advanced threateningly. I picked up Nagato and held him between us. Watch the kid! I warned them, laughing. They split off to flank me. Shit! I forgot they were ninjas as well and I wasn't exactly sure who was the bigger threat. I dodged Kushina's lunge, only to find out it was a feint and have Minato's leg sweep from behind. Still, I was a chunin and they were just jinin, so I jumped over the sweep and tossed Nagato at Kushina, leapt off the wall, and broke the rules of physics to jump on Minato's back and hijack the brain signals to his limbs so he went plowing towards Kushina, cursing. She had a choice to save Nagato or herself. She chose Nagato and Minato collided with her and they went tumbling onto a mattress. I crouched beside Nagato and gave the boy a hug. Good job, Nagato-kun. I praised him. That was fun. Can we do it again, please? 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 I don't know, have my dear little siblings learned not to laugh at me? I looked over at Kushina, trying to disentangle herself from Minato, who was temporarily paralyzed. Fuso took pity on the struggling genin and helped them untangle themselves while the paralysis wore off. I leapt to my feet and went to grab Minato's present from where I left it. Guess what? What? It's Minato's birthday! What? The entire room exclaimed. Happy birthday! I held out the present. Why didn't you tell me? Kushina demanded of me. What? Why are you accusing me? It's his birthday. Wait, are you sure it's already my birthday? Minato demanded. Well, today's the day you put on your ninja registration. I shoved the poorly wrapped package into Minato's hands. Ignoring everyone else, I watched him open it. It was a half set of what would become his signature kunai. When he opened it, he frowned. What is it? What is what? Kushina demanded and snatched it out of his hands. Yeah, what is this? I grinned and grabbed his wrist, politely waiting for him to hand the gift to Kushina. You keep getting hurt here and here. I pointed to the scars on his hand from where an opponent's kunai had slipped down his own and bit into his hand, and then pushed up his sleeve to reveal the several chunks missing from his forearm where a blade had slipped off his block. At the very least you're going to lose a few fingers if you don't start using some kind of guard while you're fighting melee, especially since you only seem to fight melee. I grabbed one of the blades and put it in his hand and pulled out my own kunai and slashed at his head. He yelped in surprise and automatically blocked. I twisted my blade and it stuck in between one of the prongs. See? Minato got a look in his eye that told me he was about to do something tricky. He twisted his wrist and jerked the kunai out of my hand, but by the time it fell from my hand, I had immobilized his wrist. Nice try. Kushina used to complain to me about all the tricks Minato would use on her in spars, so there wasn't much the boy could do to surprise me, not even with a sneaky knife to the ribs, which I blocked with one of my sticks. You're going to have to get up earlier than that to pull one over on me. Can you spar with me, please? Minato begged. I want to see how they work. Sure, I agreed. I didn't spar with them often, but I figured now would be a good time, considering I hope to be headed to Suna sometime soon. I needed to keep up my skill somehow. I want to watch. Nagato bounced. I want to see Nisan beat up the evil boy. Your awesome Nachon will take you. Kushina exclaimed. Well, you're a bad Nachon, Nagato said matter-of-factly. I ruffled the hair of the two Jinin, much to their annoyance. It's okay, you just need a bit of practice to be better big siblings. You'll figure it out pretty quick. I let the retaliatory double punch to the gut land, because I kind of deserved it. Don't hurt my Nisan. Nagato protested. Lesson number 1, don't beat up people your little brother or sister likes. I wheezed. Fuso and ISE seemed to be dying of laughter in the background. You beat up Sakumo-sensei and we like him. Minato protested. I'd hit him a total of 1 time, and that was before either of you said more than a sentence to him, I deadpanned. Besides, once you're the best Nai-san, you can get away with almost anything. Minato, you want that spar or not? Nagato hugged my legs. I'll get my stuff. Minato ran into the designated ninja room with Kushina on his heels. You two want to come? I asked the 2 adults. No! They both waved their arms and took a step back. You kids have fun, and don't get hurt, ISE said. Spend the rest of the day out. We're going to work on making this place actually livable, and clean up the blood-splattered and bug-ridden mattresses. They're not that bad. I protested. No, they're worse, but for 2 kiddos living alone, you've done a wonderful job. Fuso crouched in front of me and placed both hands on my shoulders. You've got someone to take care of you now, so relax and have fun. For a minute, I stood there stunned. In my old life, I had seen my father only once or twice a year. He always seemed to be out of the country for one classified deployment or another, and my mother had died at some point while I was in 4th grade. She was a shameless drunk and rarely gave a damn what I did or where I went, as long as I showed up at 5 o'clock sharp for dinner. Besides that, I was on my own, and only the fact that I was scared shitless of my father, who treated me more like a soldier than a son, stopped me from ending up in a jail cell before I turned 15. It might have been more due to the fact that I lived on a military base under the influence of a bunch of future Marines that I stayed on the straight and narrow, but I guess I'd never know. Now, to have someone who all but abandoned their calling for a kid and a few unwanted orphans promising something of a real family for the first time in my life, I leaned forward and hugged her, appreciating the sentiment. Slowly and deliberately, she hugged me back. Thank you, Kachan. You're welcome. We gotta find a bigger place though. I don't want to sleep on that little bed forever with Minato and Kushina. Certainly. The clan is still alive after all, even if you're all children right now. She kissed the top of my head. Now go enjoy your spar. Chapter 13. You ready? I asked Minato. Yes. Are you sure? Yes. Absolutely sure? Would you stop whatever you're doing and just start already? I don't think you're ready. Shut it, Kichiro. Half the fight is in your head, Minato, so get your head on straight, then we'll start. He rolled his eyes at Kushina, only to find she wasn't there. Kai! He shouted, dispelling the Genjutsu. Now, are you actually ready to focus? I asked. How the hell am I supposed to do that? You keep messing with my head, so how do I know when I'm ready? Minato gave up and threw his kunai into the ground in frustration. I winced. I had gone a bit too far in trying to psych him out. Sakumo, in his ANBU get-up, appeared out of sight from everyone but me. Sound familiar? He signed. I threw a senbon at him. Minato turned to follow my gaze, confused when he didn't see anyone. What are you looking at? Nothing, someone was just trying to mess with me. I released the Genjutsu layers I had woven around Minato. Okay, close your eyes. Minato huffed, but did so, and I repeated Sakumo's lesson from a year previously, almost word for word. First, you have to know exactly what you are capable of, every single tool you have at your disposal. I laid my hand flat against the center of his chest. You have to balance your ego with your humility to get the most accurate picture of your capabilities as you can. Know where you're strong and where you're weak. For example, you're extremely smart and fast, but you don't have very much chakra to work with. I'm sure you can go into more detail by yourself. I moved my hand to press 2 fingers against his forehead. Second, you have to always know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you can win. You have to believe you can beat me and keep believing no matter how many times you get beaten back. There is no substitute for absolute confidence. You're a Chunin, I'm a Genin. Minato's eyes flew open. You fought in a war. You were in the bingo book. How am I supposed to win? Less than 2 days after I became a Genin, I beat a Tokubetsu Jonin who'd been a ninja for as long as I've been alive. There's always a way to win if you think hard enough, but you absolutely cannot win if you don't believe you can, got it? I think so. Good, close your eyes. When his eyes closed, I put the kunai back in Minato's hand and wrapped my own hands around both of his. The last thing you have to do is actually win. It might take a while, but trust me, one day, you'll be able to kick my ass across the village and back. Alright? Now, keep all that in mind and focus. Go all out. Don't worry about hurting me, the ANBU are here to make sure nothing gets out of hand. Now, are you ready? After a second, Minato nodded. I backed away and settled into a ready stance as he opened his eyes. Begin. He flew towards me, weaving his blades in an almost untraceable pattern. For someone who didn't have a sensei terrified they wouldn't be able to keep up on the battlefield they would be forced onto. I simply blocked with one of the sticks and ducked under his other swing, tripping him. He turned the fall into a handspring and we squared off again. You're getting better, Minato, but I'm pretty sure Academy students could do better than you. Yes, I was goading him. To my annoyance, it was working. Kushina may have fought better when riled up, but Minato tended to make stupid mistakes, like charging me with an angry shout. I substituted myself for a water clone and crouched in one of the trees, pulling out my slacklining rope from a storage seal sewn inside of one of the pockets of my Chunin vest. I quickly strung it across the clearing, hidden by a simple and effective Genjutsu. Sakumo had nearly fallen for it once, and he helped me learn it. Minato cursed as the water clone dissolved just before it nearly knocked him out, soaking him with water. I dropped silently to the ground and slid underneath it while the boy spun around, frantically searching for me. Headhunter no jutsu. I responded happily, but quickly jumped out of the way because I knew both he and Kushina could get out of the trap even though I wasn't sure exactly how they managed it. I concealed myself with another Genjutsu and gave him another water clone to fight while I figured out some new, creative way to win. I dashed around the clearing and slipped into Sakumo's hiding spot. No, he said immediately. Come on. Some Sunanin nearly got you with this trick and you wouldn't want him to fall for it on an actual mission. I may have been better, simply because I had a single teacher focusing on me and tailoring what I learned to my strengths and weaknesses while Minato had to vie for attention among several dozen other students. After a few weeks with Kushina, he figured out how to never fall for any trick more than once, and that carried over to fighting, thankfully. I wanted to know how he did it, because Kushina and I had probably played thousands of tricks on him and not one worked twice. Sakumo just glared at me. Fine, I'll stand there and look scary. My shift ends soon, so don't wear yourself out too much. I want to see how far you've gotten on your pet project. Thanks. I dispelled my water clone. Minato was getting increasingly frustrated by the fact he was spending more time fighting and losing to clones than the real me. I'd say you are doing well, but for someone who wants to be Hokage, you really suck, Minato. I cocked my head to the side and started to circle him. My two shadow clones, which had taken far too much chakra to create than I was comfortable with, crouched in their respective hiding places, one on my slackline near the tree and the other a few steps behind me. You know, those kunai aren't magical. I know you have more in your arsenal than that. I'm not sure this is worth my time since you're so outmatched and not even giving it your all. I waved my hand dismissively and turned around, replacing myself with the clone behind me. Minato lunged forward and slapped an exploding tag onto my clone's back. The clone exploded and I took a step into the explosion, then replaced myself with Sakumo, then with my clone on the slackline. Holy shit! Minato exclaimed and leapt backwards from the unexpected appearance of an ANBU from the smoke. His back hit the rope just as I jumped and landed on it, making the rope sink a good 3 feet. We slid together and I slid off, but Minato didn't fall for the slingshot trick. He grabbed the rope and grinned at me. I barely managed to leap clear before he somehow channeled a giant lightning bolt into the rope. Sakumo disappeared into thin air as Minato swung down and landed in front of me. We were back where we started. Clever, but not clever enough, I told him and tapped my chest. He looked down at his own chest and froze as he noticed the explosive note. It was set to detonate the next time he channeled chakra or moved more than a few inches. I didn't dare activate it, mostly because I wasn't exactly sure how to safely deactivate it yet. Minato was not happy. When? He demanded. I pulled the note off him and stuck it in my pocket, grinning. When you landed on the slackline, I told him. That thing is evil. Sakumo-sensei is a sadistic bastard for making you do all those things on that damn rope. I take offense to that. I retorted. Slacklining is the best part of training with Sakumo. It had been over a year since I last legitimately lost my balance, so the training had completely paid off. Anyway, Minato, good job, but don't get riled up when you're taunted, it ruins your concentration. I have to go to training. Will you be alright getting back on your own with Nagato? I want to come. Nagato ran up and tugged on my haori. I crouched down. I'm sorry, Nagato, but you're going to have to stay with Kushina and Minato for a few hours, maybe days, okay? But they're boring. I'll tell you a secret, they can be really fun if you give them another chance, alright? But Nissan. I'll see you soon, Nagato, goodbye. I left before he could say anything more. Straight face. I waited for about an hour on the training ground I usually met Sakumo on. Most of the time, I sat and meditated. I hovered in a state where I could hear Kurama lecturing me on going easy on Minato and not destroying him right out of the gate, which I ignored, while remaining perfectly aware of my surroundings, at least from a chakra perspective. Chakra was the lifeblood of this world. Without it, nothing could live, which was why chakra exhaustion could be so dangerous. Out of nowhere, someone touched my shoulder. I knocked the hand away and stumbled out of reach, not that it would have done me much good against an enemy. When I recognized Sakumo wearing his Jonin uniform, I scowled. You're in ANBU, I greeted. You aren't supposed to know that. Yeah, but you didn't have to be the person to tell me they finally had a proper guard. You would have attacked anyone else. Not if they could prove their identity first or one of them vouched for whoever it was. Sakumo rolled his eyes. Why do you want me here? The Hokage wants me to talk you out of forming any kind of relationship with the QB. It's not going to work. He knows. I also want to know why you're doing this. Is that a question or a statement? For now, a statement. But you still want me to answer it. He didn't answer. No. I don't want you to be making a mistake. I'm not the one making a mistake. The Kazekage ordered the torture of 2 8-year-old children. They're shinobi, Kichiro. They understood what they signed up for. I made sure the entire team knew they would end up targeted because of you, me, Jiraiya, and possibly Shimizu. They're 8. They're genin. They were tortured for no reason. So, you're going to wage a war. If they go after her and Minato, how long will it be before they go after Nagato? Kichiro, you're plotting murder. Who knows how many innocents will die once you start that battle? This isn't you, Kichiro, this isn't a mission you're being told to complete, this is entirely your plan. I know. Do you? You barely have a handful of kills, Kichiro, all of which were in self-defense. You can't even beat me. What makes you think you can win against the most powerful Kage in Suna's history? He uses the iron sand, it's in the bingo book. He controls metal. My primary weapons are wooden sticks, which are made of Hashirama wood and reinforced with seals. My senbon are made of glass, similarly reinforced. I just don't carry any metal for him to use against me with his magnet release. Not to mention, I'll have the QB helping me. If it doesn't try and escape, he won't. How do you know you can trust a creature of hatred? He's not a creature of hatred any more than you or I. Sakumo shook his head. It will take you a long time to convince anyone of that. Scowling, I fell onto my back and glared up at the rain clouds. I'm not here to debate with you. The Hokage came up with a potential plan that might just lure out the Kazekage without as much collateral damage as it would for you to just march into Suna and commit suicide. Fine, what is it? No, you need to be updated first. On what? Somehow, the AIM leader, Hanzo, caught wind of your little stunt with the Uzumaki family. What? Was he upset I stole his quarry? He's an idiot for targeting humanitarians. No, somehow he knew of the boy's dormant Rinnegan. The hell? How? Unknown. That throws a wrench in everything. It does. The Sandame suspects that AIM will join forces with IWA, which provides an ideal opportunity on 2 fronts. Suna and Kiri made an alliance against Konoha. Publicly shifting our attention to IWA and AIM will invite Suna and Kiri to attack. Once they commit to an action, the Hokage himself plans to join the fighting. About time. This is the last time I am going to warn you, Kichiro. Sakumo's voice gained an edge I had only heard a handful of times. You will be civil when speaking of and with him, or there will be consequences. I huffed. He plans on decimating the Kiri lines and forcing them out of the war, but in order to do that, he needs to make sure the Suna line will hold in the meantime. Clever. What about Kumo? The second they hear there is a Kage on the front lines, they'll calm down and most likely take advantage of the opening against Kiri. Right, but won't it make Konoha look desperate to have Kage on the front lines? It might make the other countries paranoid enough for their own Kage to come out. None of the other Kage are a match for our Sandame. I shrugged. The Kazekage could give him a run for his money. I doubt that, but considering Suna's penchant for poison, it could become a close match, which is why his advisors refused to let him attend the Suna front as well. So, the plan is to stack the IWA front, lure Suna and Kiri into an attack and attack Kiri in return? What about Suna? That's my next deployment. In case you've forgotten, I've gained quite the reputation in the past few years and I have the skills to back it up. How's the IWA front going to appear stacked if one of Konoha's prominent jonin are headed to Suna? The Sandame students, as well as a handful of other prominent jonin, are headed to IWA. Village defenses? The Hokage's old teammates are remaining to run and defend the village. Good for them. I want to see what you can do, whether you're ready to actually fight on the front lines or not. Shimizu and Inazuka are already out on their next mission, and if you pass, you'll head out with me to Suna. Fine, what's the test? I already know your raw ninjutsu and jinjutsu capabilities inside and out, but your taijutsu is constantly evolving. I want to test that. With or without weapons. Your chakra must stay inside your body. No other rules. You're a jonin, this isn't fair. Yet you want to face down a Kage? With the QB and all of my tricks. Ah, yes, your tricks. I want to see how good you've gotten without them. Sakumo stood up and held out a hand to help me up. So I'm assuming I can't use the QB. Most certainly not. We don't need a village emergency. Apparently he didn't want to wait for me to get up on my own and grab the front of my vest to pull me to my feet. Whatever. I pulled out my sticks and he drew a bakken. It was a testament to my skill that he needed to limit himself for fear of causing permanent injury to me. On your mark. Begin. There was a moment of absolute stillness. I took a deep breath. Sakumo leapt forward and swung his bakken at my head. I ducked and retaliated with a strike to the knee, but the bakken appeared like magic and blocked it, nearly knocking it out of my hand with the strength of the strike. Luckily, I learned a long time ago to hold onto my sticks with chakra instead, which somehow reduced the strength of the impact. It didn't make sense, but I did it anyways. The next few seconds I spent blocking what felt like 100 attacks at a time. Sakumo was fast and I was barely fast enough to defend. I was quite good at multitasking. Between foiling a clever trip and sending a wild punch at Sakumo's nose to hide an attempt to break a rib or two, I noticed several ANBUs surrounding the Hokage and his advisors. I couldn't touch Sakumo, but it wasn't for lack of trying. I took full advantage of my size and flexibility, as well as juicing up my strength enough that any hit would count, not that any landed, not even the senbon I threw with my foot, hid in my shadow, and came from a direction Sakumo couldn't possibly have seen. He only threw the senbon back at me with a smirk and it landed in my arm. That led to a nasty list of invectives. They were mostly in English, which was lucky for me because of the growing audience. I was beginning to suspect Minato, and possibly Kushina had a hand in it, had the brilliant idea of bringing Nagato to watch me get my ass kicked. When I noticed an unfamiliar woman emerge from the shadows of the trees, I began to suspect. When two jonin appeared between two trees to stop me from using them as cover, I knew. For some reason, a number of people wanted to see Sakumo fight. Or me, but I was betting on the former. During one of the pauses where Sakumo and I just circled each other, I asked, "How many people did you invite to watch?" "Pretty much every shinobi in the village. The Chunin exams were cancelled, and since it was partially your fault, everyone needed to see a good fight without the future of the village hanging in the balance." "Asshole. You could have told me. Then you would not have shown up. You could have known if you bothered to stop by the Chunin base. I don't even know where the Chunin base is." "Your loss." Yeah, he was going down hard. The QB turned on a rolling stream of advice, most of which I adopted, allowing myself to shift into katas I shouldn't have had any way of knowing. Under the influence of the QB's chakra, my vision shifted slightly and my ability to sense increased 100-fold. Sakumo disengaged and swapped his bakken for his actual blade. "Calm down, Kichiro," he warned, circling. "I told you no using the QB. Come on, it's the only chance I have." I complained. My voice was a bit deeper and harsher than normal, which was probably part of the problem. "Your little sister is here, she might get hurt." I caught a glimpse of myself in Sakumo's blade. The irises of my eyes had changed from bright green to burning red, and the pupils narrowed into feral slits. I'm in control, Sakumo. The QB is just giving a little friendly advice. I'd call this a bit more than advice, little rat, the QB commented. Okay, fine, it's a bit of a strength and speed boost as well, but I promise I'm still me, just a little better. This isn't funny, Kichiro. Scared of a little chunin? I taunted. I'm concerned about this friendly advice. I opened my mouth to respond when said friendly advice turned up something not so friendly. Shit! I screamed. The QB's chakra turned up several hostile ninjas beneath our feet. The sudden appearance of the QB's chakra had spooked them into action. Kushina screamed. I turned and used every ounce of speed I could dredge up. At my shout, Minato had managed to throw Nagato at the nearest Jonin, then Kushina barreled him out of the way, only to be caught by a wicked-looking kunoichi. I recognized her as the daughter of the woman who occasionally gave me free dangdo. Don't you dare move a muscle, Uzumaki, or I'll rip your precious sister's throat out. That goes for everyone else here. I put on my best act, hoping the consequences wouldn't be too severe, and laughed. You think some pathetic little child would be able to force me, the QB no Yoko, to bend to your will? To my surprise, everyone bought the act. Except Kushina. She knew my acting skills inside and out and had seen my best QB imitation dozens of times, albeit before he was sealed inside of me. The kunoichi paled. I slowly drew one of my sticks and used the QB's chakra, with a bit of his help, to mold a blade onto it. I pointed it at the kunoichi. The kunoichi lifted Kushina into the air to cover her vitals. Unfortunately for the kunoichi, I was a medic. Sliding a blade between organs was simple, especially when Kushina was discreetly pointing at exactly the right place. Faster than the kunoichi could track, I lunged forward. The blade slid through Kushina's body, then through the kunoichi's. The QB yanked his chakra away from me. Any longer and I would probably have done myself serious damage. I jerked my stick out of their bodies, knocked the kunoichi out, and caught Kushina before she collapsed. The moment all three of us hit the ground, chaos erupted. Chapter 14. While I was having my little acting debut, the kunoichi had strung up a nice and pretty jinjutsu that showed me completely losing control and attacking my sister. A bit of cleverness and dumb luck on the kunoichi's part had me grabbing Kushina and landing on top of her exactly like in the jinjutsu. Even the Hokage had been caught in it. His overreaction, using his entire formidable strength to order me to regain control of the QB, automatically trapped me in my mindscape trying to reverse something that never happened. Luckily, the Jonin were still somewhat dazed by the release of the jinjutsu that their attacks were slow enough for Kushina to see and roll us both out of the way. The fact that she refused to let go of me was probably the only reason I wasn't immediately locked up in the highest security vault the village had to offer. It took me 5 minutes to escape from my own mindscape, which I found to be incredibly annoying. Let me go! Kushina screamed into my chest, her arms and legs wrapped tightly around my torso as several Jonin tried to pry her off. I'm too weak to sit up. Nissan? She asked. Her grip around me loosened and someone managed to wrench her arms out from around me. She screamed and sent my chakra across her skin and gave the people holding onto her nasty chakra burns. Her arm snapped back around my neck and she smashed my face into her neck. If I had been a full-size adult, I probably could have let her turn all clingy. Unfortunately, I had a child's body and Kushina was inadvertently suffocating me. Breathe! I managed, barely audible. Sorry. Kushina loosened her grip but didn't release me. I took a deep breath and ignored the fighting around us. Suddenly someone picked us both up and ran. I couldn't even cling to Kushina. I hoped it was a Konoha shinobi carrying us away from the fighting, but something inside me knew it wasn't. Without any warning, the arms carrying us were torn away. Someone managed to catch Kushina by the hair, but the grip failed and we hit the ground hard. Well, I hit the ground, Kushina landed on top of me. She quickly rolled off me and felt my pulse, calling my name. Minato! Help! He's barely responding. Oh, Cammy! She jerked and her hands tightened around my wrist. No! Minato cried suddenly. Minato! Kushina screamed and the sound of kunai striking flesh sounded above me. I struggled to move, but my body refused to respond. Stay down, little rat. Minato's hurt. I have to help him. By killing yourself? Be patient. Minato slumped over me. The kunai had gone nearly all the way through his chest. A combination of both his and Kushina's blood had all but soaked the front of my chin and vest. There's no more time to wait. Shina, I managed, channeling medical chakra into my free hand. Nissan. Somehow she got the message and grabbed my wrist. After a second, she laid my palm over the hole where the kunai hit Minato's heart. I barely managed to heal his heart before my chakra spluttered out. Hospital. Minato wouldn't live for much longer if he didn't get the help of a medic who wasn't half dead very soon. Minato's fingers twisted into my haori. Leave us alone! Kushina screamed. Someone kicked my side. Pathetic. The kid hailed as a hero can't even save himself. The person grabbed my hair and lifted me to my feet. My body refused to respond to my orders to fight. Leave him alone! Kushina begged. Leave him alone! The shinobi mocked. Do you recognize me, little girl? The strain on my scalp opened one of my eyes wide enough to see the shinobi holding me. This was not good. It was undoubtedly Ebizo, one of the honored siblings of Tsunegakure. I recognized him from the bingo book. This was not good. Now you can fight. All the feelings seemed to rush back into my body at once. It was painful, but worth it. Thank you. Run! I growled at Kushina, opening my eyes just enough to make eye contact. Minato, Ebizo slammed a fist into my gut. Kushina got the message once the Kyuubi's chakra started to lick at my fingers. Her eyes widened in terror. Without hesitation, she lunged for Minato, scooped him up and fled. Ebizo made the mistake of dropping me to go after her. By the time my feet hit the ground, my hands had flashed through a jutsu that turned the ground around me into mud. He sunk into it before he could make it 3 steps and both Minato and Kushina got away. I knew we were outside of the village even if I didn't exactly know where. If I could just make a big enough commotion, someone would have to come running. Go after me, fine, it's my job. I can deal with it. Go after my siblings and we have a problem. I'll give you 3 choices. 1. Stay here and take your chances fighting me. 2. Go after my siblings and the best scenario is that you die. 3. Leave and tell your Kazekage that he will be dead by the end of this war. Ebizo pulled himself out of the mud. I jerked my sticks out of their holsters. You can't win, little boy. I only have to last 2 minutes, then they'll be too far away for you to catch. Then you'll be captured. I don't care. I took a step backwards out of the mud and let it harden back into the ground. Whenever you're ready, I await your decision. Suna, someone snarled behind me. I suddenly had a very, very bad feeling as I glanced over my shoulder to see 2 IWA nin accompanied by 2 nin from AIM, all of which I recognized as Jonin from the bingo book. A second Suna nin appeared and I recognized Chio with Minato over her shoulder and a barely conscious Kushina under her arm. Shit! 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 I was trapped in the center and the Kyuubi's chakra was covering mine like a second skin. By the end of the week, the entire shinobi world would know I was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Shit! 2 Kiri nin appeared. Double shit. Looks like we're a little late to the party. The Sandame Reikage and Akumo Jonin from the bingo book appeared to complete the circle around me. Triple shit. This is a very bad situation. You think? I'm not even sure you could survive for long if a fight breaks out. You have potentially critical information. They don't know that. What little Jinin do we have here? The Reikage asked. Considering only his own jutsu could make it past the man's shield, and the fact that the man was a Kage meant that he probably had the right to start off the conversation, if anyone. I didn't bother responding. Everyone here knew exactly who I was. The Haori in red hair was a dead giveaway. You look familiar, little boy. Tell me, what's your name again? He taunted. I forced myself to think. There was always a way out. There had to be. There had to be something I was better at than anyone here. Face it, kid, if these people have half a brain between them, they'll go after you first, then fight over you like a prize to be won. You're a smart kid, but you can't outwit 10 ninjas by yourself, and your body just can't win, even if I'm in control. Your best bet is to go quietly and hope for a chance to escape later on. It doesn't mean I have to go gentle into that good night. I asked your name, boy, the Reikage snapped impatiently. I grinned. I probably would have gotten slapped upside the head for the cheek I had planned if Sakumo was there to hear me. Unfortunately, I was more concerned by the fact there were 10 enemy nins surrounding me, and the two most important people in the village, in my opinion, were dying in enemy hands. I turned to Chio. You will let me heal those 2 Jinin, or I release the QB right now and none of us make it out alive. You will not. You still owe me, little rat. Good to know my bluffing skills are still intact. You make a very good threat, so quit your griping. The QB subsided into angry grumbling. Chio threw Minato at me. I caught him, not even sliding on the ground, and knelt with him propped against me, mostly to start draining the blood from his lungs. I quickly tore his shirt open, feeling nauseous. I could heal the wounds, but by that time, he would be dead via exsanguination. I no longer felt paranoid for looking up Minato's blood type. He was B positive, the same as Kushina and myself. It would work. I used one of Minato's kunais to cut a 3-inch line into the inside of my left wrist, as well as an identical line into Minato's, then pressed the cuts together in a bastardization of a blood transfusion. Sure, chakra accomplished what tubes and needles would normally do, as well as kept my blood flowing into him, but if Tsunade caught me trying an untested stunt like it, she would probably skin me alive. With my right hand, I turned to healing the 2 holes in his chest. There were never full healings on the battlefield. As soon as I knew Minato was stable enough to remain not dead for the time being, if in horrible pain and unable to move, I laid him on the ground and finished the blood transfusion. In an hour, he would either be dead by the hand of one of the enemies surrounding us or in Konoha's hospital in emergency surgery. I couldn't risk any more chakra in case an actual fight broke out and I was forced to defend him. Now the girl, I demanded. Trade. The Reikage chuckled behind me. Give him his sister. I want to see what he does. Well, that would be a mistake, Mr. Reikage, but go ahead, you don't have to know. I know exactly how to counter your best jutsu. He had the scar over his chest, so I was sure I knew what he was going to pull on me, considering I was a Jinchuriki and he had to counter the Hachibi on a semi-regular basis. I caught Kushina. It only took me a few seconds to patch her up as well, and only another minute to complete a second blood transfusion. I stood up, slightly shaky on my feet, but the QB's crude healing fortified me after a few seconds. I faced the Reikage, rightly deeming him the biggest threat, and stood with both Minato and Kushina lying between my feet. The QB's chakra coated my skin, a few inches thick, and formed a cocoon around Minato and Kushina, careful not to touch their skin. You can't win this, Kichiro-kun. The Reikage started to form his supposedly impenetrable defense. No, I'm certain I can't, but the Kyuubi is much more powerful than the Hachibi. So, you're a perfect Jinchuriki then? That's quite the accomplishment for one so young. I see I originally targeted the wrong sibling. You most certainly did. I'm willing to forgive faults against me, but the moment you so much as threaten my family, you will die. Was that a death threat to me? Certainly. Big words for such a little boy. Kushina pushed herself up and started to use the blood-soaking Minato to draw a desperate seal on her palm. Luckily, she wouldn't need to use it and I couldn't resist my own little amusement. You seem to be laboring under the delusion that I'm going to, what was the phrase, come quietly? I can tell you this, I have no intention of going to Azkaban. He's stalling, one of the Kirinine snapped. Am I? I grinned. Each of them had shadows pooling around their feet. I released my control over the Kyuubi's chakra. Sakumo leapt down and grabbed my wrist before I could run forward to kill the Raikage with Minato's fancy new kunai. I think peace negotiations would be more helpful at this point than revenge, Kichiro. Fine, sensei, I snapped back and returned Minato's kunai. Sakumo kept a firm grip on my shoulder as if he thought I was going to attack anyways. More than a few eyes widened at my address. Sakumo was probably expecting it and I got the feeling he liked being called sensei. I made a note to call him sensei in front of any enemies if the sudden cautiousness they regarded me with was anything to go by. Then again, the White Fang was one of Konoha's more feared ninjas and if he was passing on his skill, there would probably soon be a second. Combine that with the fact I was a S-ranked combination of Tsunade and Sakumo in the making, with a nearly limitless chakra supply, I was sure that, if any of those assembled got word back to their home village, I would be immediately bumped up from a D-rank threat to a B-rank in the bingo books. The Hokage himself stepped between me and the Raikage. Very clever, old monkey, the Raikage sneered. But you can't force me to sign any treaties. No, but the Shodai Hokage's offer still stands. Sakumo's hand tightened on my shoulder in surprise, while the Raikage's expression turned stony. No one else in the clearing seemed to understand the reference. When I figured it out, my eyes widened in surprise. Sakumo's grip tightened painfully as I opened my mouth to demand how in the 9 circles of Hades the Hokage planned to fight and seal the Hachibi, at least without an Uzumaki Fuinjutsu master to help him. Uzumaki-kun, Hatake-san, my office. Jinin, report to the hospital and stay there. Jonin, I want all enemies taken to the holding cells and the interrogation department. Bring the Raikage to the basement. Kill them if they resist. Congratulations on becoming the first perfect Jinchuriki, the Raikage said as Sakumo steered me away. I'll be sure to keep my eye on you, Uzumaki. I knew Kumo operated on a slightly different system than the rest of the hidden villages, but the Raikage's acknowledgement, even if it did have a thinly veiled threat behind it, was not something I expected. Then again, the Raikage probably had more experience with the power of the tailed beasts than any other living person at this point. Hokage-sama. Kushina interrupted. She stood up, swaying slightly and holding her side where I had stabbed her. She wasn't going to be released from the hospital for a while, considering it could be several days before I'd be allowed to see her. She pressed several sealed tags into the Hokage's hand and would have pitched sideways if he hadn't caught her. Right on time, thank you, Kushina-chan. A smallish ANBU appeared at the Hokage's shoulder and gently pulled Kushina onto his back. When he bent down to pick up Minato, who was barely conscious, Sakumo continued to drag me away. Once we were out of sight and earshot, Sakumo slapped the back of my head. What was that for? I demanded, swaying. The Hokage's order felt like it was still screwing with my balance. Principal. Hey, it all turned out just fine. I couldn't care less. Your Jinin's sister getting abducted is one thing, but you? You're in for one hell of a training regime once this war is over. Sakumo swung me up onto his back. We need to make 2 stops before we head to the Hokage Tower. Go ahead. The first stop was to an unfamiliar house in the middle of a small clan compound. "This is your house, isn't it?" "Yes, it is." "Kichiro, meet my wife, Kaori." Sakumo introduced me to the woman running out of the front door. I recognized her as one of the first spectators in our spar earlier. "She's a jonin, so don't be getting any funny ideas about pranking my house." I noticed the blood splattered across the front of her vest, indicating she had fought earlier. She was also limping, but didn't seem to be in any unbearable pain. "Wait a minute, you're married?" I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. "At least she's hot." Sakumo dropped me on my ass for that little comment. "You know, I've never seen anyone get you riled up like that, Sakumo," Kaori said after greeting him with a kiss. "So, when's the baby coming?" I asked sarcastically. "You're 9, Kaori deadpanned. "So? I'm a medic." She laughed. "I like your student, Sakumo. What took you so long to bring him around?" "I never would have if I didn't have a choice." "Did you get it?" "Of course, I got it. What do you take me for?" "Well, I handed it off for a reason." "No, you were worried your student wouldn't go all out against anyone else he fought, so you made a call." Kaori handed Sakumo something I couldn't quite see. "All right, what's going on?" I demanded, suspicious. "Nothing, we have one more stop to make." Sakumo picked me up off the ground and pulled me onto his back again and took off. The second we landed outside my apartment, Fuso burst out of the door. "Thank heavens you're all right." "What about Minato and Kushina?" she asked worriedly. "Is Nagato?" I began. "He's fine. Minato and Kushina are headed to the hospital. They'll be perfectly fine. We're not here to catch up, Uzumaki-san. The hospital needs experienced assistants, and I'm sure you would like to go visit." Sakumo pulled out 2 scrolls. "The Hokage has formally requested that you and your husband offer your assistance there." "What about Nagato?" "The details can be worked out at a later date." Fuso took the 2 scrolls. "Thank you, Hatake-san." Sakumo nodded once and jumped away. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded when we landed outside the Hokage Tower. "Classified." I blinked and we were inside the Hokage's office. The Hokage was already sitting behind his desk as Sakumo set me on my feet. I slumped into the nearest chair. "Your arrogance almost ruined a trap a year in the making," the Hokage snapped at me. "Though I have to commend you for inadvertently bringing it to fruition in the process." I felt like the rug had just been pulled out from underneath me. "What plan?" I snapped. "Luring the Raikage here." "What does that have to do with the price of tea in China?" "I beg your pardon?" "What does the Raikage have to do with anything?" The Hokage appeared annoyed. "With all due respect, Hokage-sama, he didn't have clearance for any of the pertinent details and has no way to deduce the situation," Sakumo placated. "Acknowledged." Kichiro-kun, approximately a year ago, Konoha received a report that the Hachibi had escaped from its host in Kumo. They needed a new host for the Biju. We suspected they would target one of the remaining Uzumaki in Konoha. We wrongly assumed it would be you, considering you were older and stronger than your sister. A few months later, as you're aware, your sister was kidnapped through an intentional opening in the village defenses, which was why no one was alerted when you went after your sister. My jaw clenched angrily. Knowing the character of the Raikage, we have made it somewhat of a priority to hold as many Kumo Jonin prisoner as we are capable of. As of today, several dozen Jonin have been captured. We have sent ransom offers, but until now, there has been no response. We were aware that Kumo was planning a rescue mission of some kind, considering the number of captured became a ridiculous percentage of their fighting force. The percentage was probably only in the single digits, but to even possess 1% of an opposing country's Jonin force was unheard of. The Raikage puts his shinobi before himself, and it was only reasonable that he would personally lead a rescue force. For the past week and a half, we have suspected that he may be in the area, but we had no possible way to draw him out. At the same time, we were alerted that a combination of Suna and Kiri forces were preparing to attack. With that information, I ordered Sakumo to lure them to the edge of the village by purposely dropping hints to the Suna nin tailing him. So that's why you were explaining a war strategy to me in the middle of an unsecured training ground. The entire conversation was scripted, the Hokage assured me. We canceled the Chunin exams and put out word of a spar, coded so that Konoha Shinobi would know the basics of the plan and would play along. Sakumo began the spar with you and we waited. That was why I told you no ninjutsu, Sakumo explained. When you pulled out the Kyuubi's power, you unveiled a dangerous IWA operative, which nearly made the entire plan fall apart. Fortunately for everyone, except perhaps you, her genjutsu affected everyone no matter the village. During the ensuing confusion, you were kidnapped by Suna. At that point, I feared the entire plan had fallen apart until you drew on the Kyuubi's power while surrounded. After that, it was a simple task to rout the Sunakiri invasion and send out a capture force. Your confidence had us worried the Raikage would catch on to our ruse. Fortunately, he didn't, and everyone, excepting a few Kiri nin, lived to tell the tale. In my opinion, Konoha just got incredibly lucky the half-assed plan actually worked. Chapter 15. Out of curiosity, how did you get the IWA agent to drop her guard? Sakumo asked curiously. I pretended to be the Kyuubi. The Hokage and Sakumo flinched. Oh, for heaven's sake. Quit being such sticks in the mud. It worked, didn't it? Kid, watching you start to transform and attack your little sister is not a pleasant experience, Sakumo commented. Yeah, well, don't get caught in a genjutsu next time. I wasn't caught. Wanna guess why? The Kyuubi, so I would appreciate it if you at least talked about him civilly while in my presence. Better yet, let's include him in the conversation. I have nothing to say to those creatures. I'm making them be nice, so you need to return the favor. I'll return the favor when the favor's been given. Enough about the Kyuubi, Kichiro-kun. I scowled. At some point before I make Jonin, I'm going to have to transform, at least to see what I can do, so get over it, I'm not going to go insane. The Hokage just changed the subject. Hatake-san has insisted that you are ready for promotion to Tokubetsu Jonin. I rolled my eyes. There has to be a mission requirement for a promotion like that. Mission count means nothing. Today's spar was supposed to determine whether you were ready. I don't specialize in combat. If anything, I specialize in medical ninjutsu. I am aware, but several other things have also been brought to my attention. You are pursuing an interest in Fuinjutsu, correct? No, that's Kushina. And Minato by extension. The seals you've developed claim differently. Just a few explosive notes and storage seals. It wasn't a lie, I had only made a few explosive notes and 1 or 2 storage seals. I have invested more than a passing interest in Fuinjutsu myself, and I can assure you, these are not explosive notes. He held up a stack of my notes. Shit. How did he find those? They were supposed to be sealed away with the rest of the Uzumaki records. I scowled in response while the Hokage made a show of shuffling through my notes. It seems like you've delved deeply into one particular branch of Fuinjutsu. My arms crossed defensively. Your notes are missing a very conspicuous seal. I rolled my eyes. From this, I get the impression you knew you would become the Kyuubi Jinchuriki for some time beforehand. I never gave any reason for you to think differently. He laid the papers down. Is there a problem? I'm entitled to my own research. You were 7 years old when this research began, and it stopped shortly before you were first deployed. The references here in your notes are not to any library or any base of information in Konoha. In fact, I distinctly remember a visit I made to the Uzushiogakure library about 5 years ago, and these references match up quite well. In fact, if I didn't know better, I would assume you learned from the Uzu library itself. I didn't answer. Tell me, how did you obtain access to information? I am fully capable of reading. The Hokage took a deep breath. Hatake-san, do you know how your student has such extensive knowledge in Fuinjutsu? I only addressed the topic a handful of times when explaining the standard use of storage seals and again when teaching him to utilize explosive notes. All other knowledge he has obtained on his own, thus I cannot answer your question. Over the past 2.5 years, you've caused me more headaches than any other individual in this village, Kichiro-kun. My pleasure. Maybe that comment was a little uncalled for. The Hokage held up one of the seals, the Shiki Fujin. How did you gain access to this seal? There was no compulsion to answer, so I remained silent. Did you share this with anyone? Do you take me for an idiot? I demanded. Of course, I didn't, but your student gave a copy to my sister if you're worried about information leaks. I told her it was a forbidden seal, so I doubt she shared it with anyone other than Minato. How do you know it's forbidden? It's suicide to use, the fact is written all over the seal. If it wasn't forbidden, it should be. Almost all of these other seals can be used to seal a biju. I knew I'd end up becoming a Jinchuriki, so I thought I'd get ahead and try and figure out what seal would be used beforehand. It didn't work if you're interested. Mito created an entire new seal array and I'm only partway through deciphering it. Why does the seal matter? I'm an Uzumaki and I'm curious. Besides, I might as well figure it out before Minato and Kushina take an interest. The Hokage nodded. Are you capable of using these seals? Yes, I gritted out. But it will be against my will. From your earlier reaction, I assume you understood my proposal to the Raikage. Yes. I plan on sealing the Hachibi into one of the Kumo shinobi in exchange for an agreement of peace. Kumo is perfectly capable of sealing their own biju. Their seals don't last and end up forcing the Jinchuriki to control the Hachibi alone. Yeah, how are you going to persuade the Raikage to let Konoha get their hands on the Hachibi and expect us to just give him back? Because you will be the only one to attend the sealing. Yeah, the Raikage is going to let a 9-year-old take that kind of responsibility. Well, right now, your sister is the only other person available with the Uzumaki chakra necessary to safely perform such a seal. Uzumaki chakra isn't required. I'd like to keep Kumo thinking it is. Why? I suppose you would rather go out to one of the other war fronts and handle that yourself. The Hachibi is in no state to help advocate for the freedom of the tailed beasts. Take your Hokage's offer and seal him on your terms and mine. Kichiro-kun? I don't want to do this. Then leave the Hachibi to be repeatedly sealed by a faulty seal, escape and attack the village, furthering the hatred focused at my siblings. It doesn't mean I want to sentence someone to becoming a Jinchuriki. They probably won't even have a choice in the matter. Then demand that you pick out the next Hachibi Jinchuriki from the Raikage. He won't listen. You don't understand the fear that accompanies any mention of myself and my siblings. He will concede. Fine. I still don't like this. You are perfectly entitled to your opinion, but you will do it. I believe the Nibi is also held by Kumo, so I want you to take a trip and meet that Jinchuriki. You're not the boss of me. When it comes to my siblings, I am. I scowled. Fine, I answered everyone. But only on 2 conditions. First, I choose from a list of candidates in whom the Hachibi will be sealed. Second, I go to Kumo to perform the sealing and meet the host of the Nibi. You thought through freeing your siblings. I have. Care to share? No. Sharing is caring. Shut up, little rat. 2 heads are better than 1. Not when 1 is your head. At least come up with something legitimate. I don't listen to ad hominem arguments. He just ignored me. I'm still curious. Uzumaki, are you listening? Not to you. What do you want, Hokage-sama? You're in communication with the QB. Yes, I am, and you can't stop me. Both the Hokage and Sakumo's jaws tightened, but they didn't comment. Someone knocked loudly on the door. Enter, the Hokage called out. The council trudged in a moment later. Thank you for arriving promptly. I will get straight to the point. In a few minutes, I will be going to the Raikage to propose an agreement. Konoha would securely seal the Hachibi for Kumo in exchange for a ceasefire. This is unwise, Danzo said immediately. Konoha is still strong. Konoha is strong enough now, but if we continue fighting this war on 4 fronts, we will lose. The Kiri and Suna conflicts can be resolved within the year, but the conflict with IWA could extend for some time. Our villages are too well balanced. This agreement appears as if Konoha lost the war. It is not the entirety of the agreement, Councilman. Kumo also possesses the Nibi, whose host is not yet a shinobi. The agreement will be a tailed beast and a non-aggression treaty in exchange for the sealing of the Hachibi. Interesting. I approve of this agreement. No one asked you. Will this individual be incorporated into the village forces? The female council member intervened before the Hokage could answer. Shimura-san's point is valid. Through a stroke of luck, we have the Raikage in custody and the ability to make any demands we wish. Sure, we can demand that Kumo defer completely to Konoha, I argued, but Kumo will not abide by unfair terms for any length of time, and should we win any of the other wars, the moment Kumo breaks contract it will incite the other nations to do so as well and possibly ally themselves against us. We could not survive against a formal alliance of the other nations. I couldn't have said it better myself, the Hokage agreed with me. Do you always allow Genin to control your arguments, Sarutobi? I snorted. Chunin, I corrected. I'm a Chunin and I know I've mentioned this before. The woman glared at me, furious. Hold your tongue, Uzumaki, the Hokage ordered. I made a show of zipping my lips closed and the Hokage whipped a kunai at me that just barely grazed my cheek. Sakumo slapped the back of my head. Now, I have already begun discussing Uzumaki-kun's role in this matter with him, and his analysis of my point of view is accurate. As of right now, Kumo is under the impression that an Uzumaki is essential to a successful, enduring seal, and I wish to maintain that illusion. Thus, Uzumaki-san will be essential to this process. I will not tolerate disrespect on anyone's part, is that understood? I glared at the Hokage, but nodded anyways. I could be polite. Reluctantly, the council members agreed. Sakumo had melted into the background, his presence all but forgotten. Now, this is the agreement which will be presented to the Raikage, who is waiting in the basement. I do not wish to arrive with an entourage. My current choice of a companion is Uzumaki-kun. I know there is an objection to this. Besides his age, is there any legitimate objection to this? If so, what is a better alternative? Shimura-san, do you have anything to say? I winced. Danzo ignored the veiled jibe. First, Uzumaki-san has no experience in politics. To place him in such a position would be unwise. Second, Uzumaki-san is 9. Even the most prodigious of individuals his age are no match for a Kage. Taking a boy like him would only weaken your position. I opened my mouth to counter, but the Hokage cut me off with a look. I clamped my mouth shut. My final point is that if he can't keep himself under control in a situation with minor repercussions, how can you trust him in a meeting with one of the other Kage? I didn't move, but in my head, I acknowledged that Danzo did have a point. Then again, I knew I'd probably attack the Raikage once or twice if I was forced into the same room with him for an extended period. The Hokage would probably spend more time keeping heads from rolling than negotiating. I agree with Shimura-san, the two other council members chorused. The Hokage looked at me. I shrugged. Do you want me to defend myself or something? Considering you were just accused of ineptitude and immaturity, I expect you to be a bit more indignant. Well, you have no intention of changing your mind, so I don't see how arguing would change the outcome, aside from setting the minds of your council at rest, but the council isn't a group of people to be placated, but a group meant to advise. Take that for immature and incompetent. The Hokage looked back at Danzo, who was not happy. He's still a boy. How do you intend to maintain your power with a child? I frowned. The argument didn't feel right. We have our differences, Shimura-san, but in this case, I believe a child would have a bigger impact on the Raikage than any jonin I could choose to accompany me. I'm sure you understand the importance of providing a united front. You discredit Uzumaki-kun's accomplishments. If I recall correctly, he was one of the reasons the war with Suna turned in our favor, as well as a significant part of the reason we are still holding the front with IWA. We both know Kumo has a much more liberal point of view concerning Jinchuriki. The Raikage has recognized Uzumaki-kun as the first perfect Jinchuriki, whatever that means. It means someone who has partnered with the Biju sealed inside of them and has potentially increased their strength by an exponential factor, I explained. If you're so strong, why haven't you been on the war front? Danzo demanded. Enough. Shimura-san, you have proven yourself incapable of giving sound advice and remaining respectful to the other parties present. He's still your teammate, Sarutobi, one of the remaining council reproached. Such action in present company is inappropriate. No, the actions of this council are inappropriate. The Hokage stood up sharply. I did not want to be here for this fallout, entertaining as it may become. I knew drama when I saw it. I'll wait outside. I moved to leave. Sit down, Uzumaki, he ordered. The seal on my forehead gave a painful twinge to make his point. I really should. Sit down. I sat and yanked the kunai out of the back of my seat, then tossed it onto the Hokage's desk. The Hokage motioned at the wall. I glanced in that direction and noticed someone push themselves off the wall. I recognized them as an Uchiha, who looked slightly strange dressed in the standard jonin uniform instead of the uniform of the military police I was accustomed to. Instead of a hataite, I noticed he had a strip of black cloth around his forehead before my attention was drawn back to Danzo. Uchiha Kagami? Danzo exclaimed in disbelief. He died over 15 years ago. What game are you playing, Sarutobi? This is no game, Shimura-san. We are in the middle of a war. When Uzumaki-kun made that offhanded comment about your personal army, Shimura-san, I thought you were just covering holes in our defenses, quietly feeding intelligence, maybe covering a few missions my shinobi didn't have the time or energy to complete. Since he was declared dead, Uchiha Kagami has been working as a non-entity. I gave him the task of summarizing your activities alongside Hatake-san. Danzo's jaw clenched. What was meant to be a task of a few hours turned into a 3-day investigation alongside an entire team, an investigation that has still not been completed. The Hokage picked up a large box from behind his desk and slammed it onto the desk. These files provide the picture of an extremely detailed campaign against the Uchiha clan. One thing caught my attention. Orders, thankfully not yet filed, limiting the Uchiha to village guards and ordinary police. Wait, what? How are the Uchiha already being marginalized? How long was the coup in the making? You look a little confused, Kichiro-kun. Let me say this plainly, this council has acted behind my back and undermined my authority, not because of a mistrust of my leadership abilities, but because they have personal interests and grudges which did not align with the village as a whole. Yeah, I should have ignored orders and just left, damn the consequences. I had no right to be in this room. The three of you may not be specifically beholden to the needs of the people of this village, but I am. The Uchiha clan helped found this village, and I'll be damned before this leadership is turned against its own people. Do you have any idea of the potential fallout of these policies, Shimura-san? The Uchiha are a powerful and prideful clan, and if they turn on the village, there will be little left for the other countries to sweep away. The Uchiha are cursed. Whether we give them reason or not, they will turn against us. It is in our best interests to make sure they don't have the strength necessary to tear apart this village from the inside. No, it's in your best interests, not the village. Your sensei. I'm perfectly aware of the Nidame's dislike of the Uchiha clan. He lived through a time when his clan waged an endless war against the Uchiha. That war is over, and the enmity should have died with him. You're implying you planned the death of the Nidame. How dare you! Tobirama-sensei taught me everything I know. The Hokage roared, and I barely had a chance to brace myself before the power of the two men swept through the room. My chair shuddered as Sakumo grabbed the back to steady himself. I couldn't even muster up any humor at the fact that Sakumo was the second youngest in the room. Power-wise, every individual in the room could theoretically grind Sakumo and I into the ground twice over, even with the Kyuubi's assistance. By the time that thought finished processing, I was unconscious. Chapter 16. When I woke up, I lay on an old futon. Sakumo sat at my feet, holding his head. Uchiha Kagami crouched beside me. Feeling better? Kagami asked. No, I responded. What happened? Do not feel bad, your sensei collapsed shortly after you. I think the rest of that argument is better left in the past. As soon as you recover, the Hokage wants to meet you. About the wreckage? Yes. Can it wait until tomorrow? No. Kagami helped me sit up. I should introduce myself. Uchiha Kagami, he held out a hand. I took it, swaying slightly. Shortly before you became a genin, it became my job to prevent Kumo from obtaining an Uzumaki. I made the mistake of assuming Kumo would target you instead of your sister. It was a bad call on my part, I apologize. Well, why didn't you do anything once you knew? I did. I placed a genjutsu on her sensei to prompt him to help so you wouldn't need your memory scrubbed of my existence. Clever. Did Jiraiya ever figure out the genjutsu? You would have met me much sooner if he did. Well, am I going to get my memory scrubbed of you now? Kagami laughed lightly. Hell no, it's time I come back into the boring, old standard forces. My use in the shadows has expired. Besides, it's been too long since I last got to embarrass my best student. He ruffled Sakumo's hair. Only student, Sakumo corrected, sounding nearly as nauseous as when I screwed up the genjutsu I was supposed to be testing on him. Now you're all grown up with your own cute little student who gives you almost as much trouble as you gave me. Please don't give him any ideas, sensei. Almost as much trouble? I feel like I, failed a test of some sort. You have to be a damn good genius to give someone as much trouble as Sakumo gave me. Anyways, you looking for a hot date, kid? Kagami put his arm around my shoulder as if I was his best buddy. What? He's 9, sensei. Is no one free of your insufferable romanticism? You were 6 when I said you'd marry that girl. What was her name? Ah, I remember, Kaori. Now look who. Sakumo elbowed Kagami in the gut. Still, I'm always right. Most of the time. Leave my student alone. Kagami fell back laughing insanely as the door opened to reveal the Hokage, his face sour. Good to know you're enjoying your newfound freedom, Kagami. Kichiro-kun, are you ready? No, I muttered and inched away from the crazy Uchiha. He doesn't bite, Kichiro-kun, the Hokage commented with some amusement. Yeah, but someone dosed him with laughing gas and I don't want any. Lighten up, kid, Kagami patted me on the back, much rougher than strictly necessary. The bastard rakeage isn't all that scary. Besides, he'll be all tied up with chakra binding seals so you won't have to worry about a thing. I'm more concerned that I'm being haunted by some kind of ghost. I'm not a ghost. History books say you died due to injuries from the same mission that brought about the Night Aim's death. He snorted. Looked me up, didn't you? No, I just paid attention to history class. You've never taken a single damn history class, kid. Looked me up, didn't you? Obviously. Can't have my cute little student picking up a random brat from a different world. He does things like that. I jerked away, alarmed, but he just winked at me then turned away. Hey, monkey man, the bastard can stew for a while. Let's go celebrate my newfound freedom. My daughter will be there. Kagami. Everyone needs to lighten up here. Come on. Let Intel do their deal and this work can be as good as one. Come on. I got Hunu to meet us at my place with booze and... Your daughter is 9, Sakumo pointed out. Your point? She'll have Kichiro-kun to hang out with and a nice, private training ground to mess around in. Someone needs to make sure we all get home tonight, might as well be the kids. I have to. I tried to get out of this impromptu meeting. Your cute little siblings are going to be unconscious for the next 24 hours and the rest of your family fell asleep about a half hour ago and gave your bed to the squirt. You're not going to be able to sleep for a while and my little girl could use a boyfriend. How? Shadow clones. Kagami hauled me over his shoulder. I miss when I could do this to Sakumo. Let me go! I demanded. If I wanted to, I probably could have fought my way out of his grip, but attacking a Jonin, who I was certain happened to be quite close to Kage level considering how he seemed to mess with Sakumo with impunity, never ended well without a very surefire way of escape, which I certainly did not have. I'm no one's boyfriend. Sorry, kid, if little Yasu likes you, I'm not letting you break her heart. What the hell, man, let me go. Nope. I kicked and writhed. I even tried to replace myself with everything in the room, but Kagami seemed to know all my tricks. His shoulder pressed painfully into the bruise on my side, but I was too proud to show the pain. Sealless substitution is a nice touch. Sakumo didn't get the hang of that until he was 13. The Hokage chuckled. Perhaps I do need a few hours to enjoy myself. Don't compare me to Sakumo. I protested at the same time as Kagami led the march out of the room. That's what us old guys are here for, to embarrass the younger generation. I thought the older generation was just there to get beaten up by the younger, I scowled. Give it a few more decades and you might stand more than 5 seconds against me, kid. I snarled in annoyance and struggled the entire way through the village. We stopped in front of an old, abandoned building in the section of the village most densely populated by Uchiha. Kagami dropped me on the ground, seeming merely amused by my threats of revenge and inventive curses. Kai! Kagami shouted with far too much enthusiasm. The abandoned, run-down building suddenly appeared to refurbish itself within seconds. Yasu! He hollered. Tuchan's secret mission is over. A girl cheered loudly from inside the house and raced out the door a moment later. He swung her up off the ground and onto his back as she giggled. Does that mean I can introduce you to my team? Sure. I'll take you to training tomorrow. How does that sound? She cheered as a woman stepped out of the house. Kachan! Guess what? Tuchan's secret mission is over. I heard, she said patiently as Kagami greeted her with a kiss, quickly ushering everyone inside. Nice of you to finally bring your student around, Sakumo-kun. The woman smiled widely. I had tried to hang back in hopes they forgot about me, but no luck. She held out a hand to me. I'm Uchiha. It's nice to meet you, Kichiro-kun. I didn't have anything against Kagami or his family, but I felt like I was being dragged to someone else's family reunion. Kagami and Hiruzen are changing in there. Dinner is about to be put on the table, so hurry up. Sakumo pulled me into the room. The Hokage had hung his official robes on a hook beside the door and was pulling off the armor beneath it. The hat had been left in the Hokage tower. Hang up your Haori beside the Hokage's things and toss your Hitaiate and vest somewhere with your Senbon pouch, Sakumo instructed. Why? I asked. Sakumo smiled, but Kagami answered. There's no ranks in my house, so you're just a kid here, Kichiro-kun. I was all for not being a shinobi. Sakumo and the Hokage left before I managed to take off my vest. The soreness from fighting Sakumo earlier that day, as well as the minor injuries during the invasion afterwards, coupled with the extended use of the Kyuubi's chakra over the past few days, left me extremely sore. Kagami finished wrapping his knuckles with strips of black cloth but hesitated before taking a knee in front of me and deftly helped me take off the stiff vest without raising my arms and stretching the already torn skin from being tossed around. You should have said something, kid, and I wouldn't have thrown you around like that. I shrugged. I never got a moment to heal it. Heal it now. I hesitated, then lifted my shirt to look at the bruises. Kagami didn't react when he saw the impressive array of red and purple marks around my torso. Tuchan? Yasu asked from the doorway. Kachan says dinner's waiting. We'll be there in a minute. Okay. A minute later, I had finished healing. Kagami wrapped the palms of my hands with a few strips of white cloth and did the same thing in place of my Hitaiate. He put a hand on my shoulder. Hopefully you're never in the same position as me, just not existing in the world for over a decade, but I want to tell you that the few people who knew I was alive, that I existed, became very precious to me. Sakumo is one of those people. You probably haven't noticed since he's extremely good at hiding it, but he's prone to just becoming very depressed, often for no reason. I guess I just want you to know you've done a lot more for him over the past 2.5 years than he's ever done for you. You probably don't understand. I understand. Then thank you. Come on, let's go eat. Hey! I protested as he tossed me back over his shoulder and carried me out. Who's ready to be fed by the best damn cook in the Shinobi Nations? He announced as I kicked him in the stomach. It had no effect. When he set me down, nicely this time, when I turned around, I found Yasu flying at me. I yelped and ducked just in time to get out of the way. The adults laughed as she flung herself at me a second time. What the hell? Leave me alone. I dodged a second time and slid underneath the low table and out the other side. She jumped over the table at me, but the girl's mother caught her around the waist and sat her down. Everyone else took a seat. I weighed my options and decided I wanted to avoid the 3 Uchiha more than I wanted to express my dislike of the Hokage and sat down with Sakumo on my right and the Hokage at the end of the table on my left. The meal was simple, traditional, and the awkwardness quickly dissolved. There were a few other people there, Sakumo's wife, the Hokage's wife and team, and the Uchiha clan head and his family. It was halfway through the meal before I recognized the scowling teenager sitting stiffly across from me. I jerked sharply. You alright? Sakumo asked quietly. The Hokage watched out of the corner of his eye as he continued the conversation. I'm fine, I responded. I'll be right back. I stood up and went outside. After a minute, I heard someone follow me out as I sat down on the back porch steps. Tsunade sat down beside me. You look awful, she commented bluntly. What happened in there? Nothing. Liar. Fine, I just thought of something and I didn't want everyone looking at me. What did you think of? Right now, I'm thinking of you leaving. People are worried about you. This doesn't have anything to do with anything. Then, go away. I stared out over the backyard turned training ground, barely able to make out the shapes of the trees just beyond the fence. I know it's hard while your sister. It has absolutely nothing to do with what happened today, I promise. I have no intention of going down any dangerous thought trails, so just relax and go back to the party. I just need a few minutes to figure something out. Still suspicious, Tsunade left. I wasn't particularly surprised at Fugaku's appearance, more at how obviously interconnected the strongest people of the shinobi world were. As an obvious orphan, in canon, Minato would have had no connection. From what I could gather, at his inauguration, Minato was the shinobi nation's Carnegie. There was probably a better analogy, but the history I remembered was beginning to fade and I didn't have Google to refresh it. Naruto's fascination with the Yondaime suddenly made a lot more sense, considering the three other Hokages all had their own mighty accomplishments and were consistently overshadowed by the Yondaime, even though his reign barely lasted a year. There was a much bigger picture forming in my head, but that was the gist of it. Kichiro-kun, Kagami called out. You might want to get in here before Sakumo shreds your reputation. I rolled my eyes and obliged. He lives! Kagami cried as I entered. He had obviously started on the drink, as had most of the other adults, while Fugaku was making a valiant attempt to sneak his taste. Unfortunately, even though they were impaired, he was in a room with several of the strongest shinobi in the village, and Kagami slapped his hand away without even looking. What's on your mind that has you running out of the room, kiddo? Do you have a copy of the history of the shinobi nations I can borrow for a few minutes? Preferably not the civilian version. Sure, but you have the professor sitting not 3 feet in front of you, why not ask him? We're all dying for a piece of your mind. That came out wrong. We all want to hear what has your knickers in a twist. Still wrong. We all want to know what you're thinking. Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, but he's biased. Do you have the book or not? Kid, every self-respecting ninja has at least 2 copies of that thing. Kagami pointed at an inconspicuous shelf in the corner of the room. Top shelf, left side. You need someone to get it down for you, shorty? Nah, I'm good. I jumped up and attached a hand to the ceiling, then stuck my feet to the ceiling and walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out the book, then flipped to land in a crouch. Bring it over here, kid, we're all dying from curiosity. I barely kept an amused smile off my face and obliged while pulling a pencil and booklet I painstakingly bound for my own convenience out of my pocket. The first half of the booklet was covered with a menagerie of notes and odd sketches of people to avoid even if they weren't in the bingo book. The notes were all written in English, making the entire booklet impossible to decipher. Before I could open it, Kagami snatched it out of my hand. I've been wanting to get a closer look at this for almost a year. Give it back! I protested. This isn't any code I've seen, Kagami commented, trying to decipher the script. I had to hold back a laugh when I saw him holding it upside down and backwards. So? Give it back. It's mine. All right. He closed it and held it out to me. Before I could snatch it back, he tossed it to Yasu. The girl giggled and tossed it to Jiraiya. Real mature. I rolled my eyes as the booklet went around the table and each person tried to decipher it without luck. While I was distracted, Kagami snatched the textbook out of my hand. Is it Torment Kichiro Day or something? I demanded. The booklet landed beside the Hokage's hand and the room waited with bated breath as he opened it. I took the opportunity to snatch the textbook back from Kagami and marched up to the Hokage and held out my hand expectantly. Almost right away, the Hokage figured out the way my notes were supposed to be read, even though his eyes skimmed it from right to left. Yeah, he wouldn't be able to decipher it like that, not that I expected him to be successful. He would have to be able to understand a different alphabet as well as an entirely different language, which was incredibly unlikely, if not impossible. I'm not sure I could figure this one out, the Hokage said, returning the booklet. I smirked. No, you can't. Do you have a name for it? I shrugged. English. The group rolled the foreign word around in their heads as I sat down and opened the history book, refocusing on my original task, figuring out just how deeply nepotism and cronyism ran in this world. It didn't take long for the conversation to turn away from my eccentricities, but I noticed the Hokage, Kagami, and Sakumo watching me out of the corners of their eyes. I methodically flipped through the textbook, counting and noting down important points. Your conclusion? The Hokage took a knee beside me as I finished up. Startled, I threw my elbow back at his gut, enhanced with chakra. He caught my arm easily. Because he needed a slap upside the head, I followed through with a punch to the face. He caught it and raised an eyebrow at me. The seal on my forehead started to burn and I pulled away, rubbing it, while he shook out his hands. Tsunade. I thought you said you never taught anyone your chakra punch. I didn't. She answered from across the room where she was bickering with her teammates. She didn't, Sakumo said. He hit me with one of those punches within 5 minutes of meeting me. He never even laid eyes on Tsunade Heim. Impressive, the Hokage laid a grandfatherly hand on my shoulder. So, what's all this secrecy about your notes and thoughts about? I scowled and stuffed the booklet in my pocket. Before I had a chance to answer, Fugaku marched up in front of me. Fight me, he demanded. I beg your pardon? You're not as good as everyone seems to think. I don't want to fight. Come on, kid, where's your pride? You can't let a challenge like that go. Kagami said and put an arm around Fugaku's shoulders. The teenager shrugged him off. Besides, the clan scions challenge each other all the time. I'm not a scion, I snapped back and stood up to put the textbook away. Close enough, little cousin, Tsunade shoved my gear into my chest while taking the book away. I want to see how you stack up against the Uchiha Golden Boy. I don't. Fight! Fight! Yasu chanted excitedly. Come on, kid, don't disappoint the lady. Kagami insisted. Yeah, I don't bow to the whims of every bloodthirsty child I meet, thank you very much. I shoved my gear back at Tsunade. I've already fought twice today. That was hours ago, and it was a fight and a heated conversation. I was already being hustled out to the backyard, my protests ignored. All right, anything below B rank is fine, obviously, no killing. Kagami let us out. It was dark and the moon provided barely enough light for me to see by, though that would change if Fugaku started launching fireballs at me. Sakumo pulled me aside. Fugaku-kun has a bit of an ego, so please actually put some effort into this. You will not shame yourself and me in a pathetic match like this. Shut up. He has the Sharingan. I know. It's not strong enough to control me. I know. Beat that brat to a pulp. You're far too invested in this. I made sure to fumble as I attached my pouch of Senbon to my leg. Fugaku snorted and activated his Sharingan. I shrugged on my bloodstained Shinin vest and fumbled the zipper. Just because I could, I drew on a small amount of the Kyuubi's chakra to help me sense so I didn't have to rely entirely on my eyes, which could be easily blinded. It would also help me fight off Jinjutsu. Fugaku swallowed as he felt the Kyuubi's chakra appear. I didn't know very many water jutsu if need be, but I knew enough. Fugaku was a Chunin like me, so I wasn't particularly worried about being outmatched. He started with a Jinjutsu, which I ruined before he could complete. I launched a handful of Senbon at him. He just rolled his eyes and knocked them away with several shuriken. You're going to have to do better than that. Make me. Fugaku busted out the ninjutsu and I spent the next part of the fight dodging various fireballs and spikes of earth. Thankfully, Fugaku's repertoire was limited by his age. In less than a minute, the barrage faded. I landed, my hair slightly singed from a close shave. During the onslaught, I attached several Senbon and a kunai to each foot to throw if I got the chance. It was one of my favorite tricks, No one ever thought to watch for projectiles from the feet, simply because feet had no opposable thumbs, which was easily remedied by chakra. I dug my toes into the ground, preparing for his taijutsu onslaught. He charged. I had wondered where Sakumo had learned the Uchiha taijutsu style to teach me, but with Kagami as his sensei, it made more sense. Fugaku's attacks were easy to counter, but the strength behind them forced me to use chakra when I couldn't dodge. "Hold still, you little brat." Fugaku snarled as I managed to dodge his sudden change in style. I like my face how it is, so you have to promise not to mess it up." "What does that?" Fugaku recoiled as I switched my style. Until then, I had left my feet planted and defended with my arms. I switched to one of the styles Sakumo had focused the most on, which had me flying through the air and attacking with every part of my body, starting with a sweep to the legs. I was at a significant disadvantage in size, but with chakra, I could match strength without much problem. In speed, he was slightly faster, but I was smaller and had better control over my body, so his Sharingan didn't give him enough of an advantage. Fugaku swore as my second stick, from his perspective, appeared out of nowhere, unable to be dodged. He couldn't counter what his eyes couldn't see. While he struggled to avoid the stick, he looked away just long enough for me to launch a Senbon from the bottom of each of my feet. One lodged itself in the carpals of his dominant hand and the other missed. I kicked the successful Senbon for good measure and he screamed in pain. When I kicked the Senbon, he managed a solid kick to my ribs followed by a punch to my solar plexus. We both broke apart. Most pain, I could numb and continue to function while the QB healed me. The problem with getting punched in the solar plexus was that it wasn't pain, per se, but when hit with a shinobi strength punch, my entire body temporarily shut down. I managed to remain standing, hoping the pain from the Senbon would occupy Fugaku long enough for me to recover enough to move. I could heal the damage to my organs while fighting. I glanced at the adults. Tsunade looked worried, rightly so. She was probably the only one who fully understood the damage I just took. She took a step forward to stop the match, but I shook my head sharply and forced myself to stand straight, my hand over my stomach, healing. The rest of the adults were splitting their attention between a conversation and watching the match from the porch. Yasu sat on the steps, fascinated. It was my turn to bring out ninjutsu, but without hand seals. Fugaku pulled out the Senbon and turned to glare at me, holding his hand. He wouldn't be able to use hand seals and I doubted he knew seal-less jutsu like I relied on. Seal-less jutsu took a long time to learn, so most shinobi tended to forego the speed boost in exchange for learning a larger number of jutsu. Fugaku ran forward and I blasted him back with a battering ram of wind. I couldn't quite move yet, so Fugaku came at me from my right side. A much deadlier blade of wind forced him to leap out of the way and land on his injured hand with an angry shout of pain. He tried to attack me from behind, but I closed my eyes and blasted him with a jet of water that expelled more chakra than I intended. He continued to run around me, but by that point, I could move freely. He jumped towards me and my hands hit the ground at the same time at his feet. The ground sucked him into the earth up to his waist, a modification of the headhunter jutsu. I leapt over his readjusted strike and grabbed his wrist in the process and twisted his arm behind him until the blade of his kunai touched the base of his skull, just like Kakashi did to Naruto during the bell test. The small audience went silent. "I yield," Fugaku growled. I released him and lifted him out of the ground, then kicked his ankle petulantly. "What was that for?" he demanded, hopping backwards on one foot. "That hurt, and it's going to take me forever to heal, you bastard." "It was a spar. You're supposed to pull your punches." He stuck his injured hand in my face. "I didn't see you holding anything back." I reached down with my free hand and pulled a Senbon and a kunai from where they were attached to the bottom of my feet. I would have destroyed the carpals in your hand via kunai instead if messing with your pain receptors via a puny Senbon. Where the hell did that Senbon come from anyways? The store. Kagami stepped between us with a light before Fugaku could retaliate for my smartass comment. Good fight. Kichiro, are you determined to rack up the blood pressure of everyone assembled? Yes, I grunted and fell to one knee. Fine, just so we're clear. Let's get you both to Tsunade. I can fix myself, I retorted. I'm fine, Fugaku snapped, glaring at me. Idiot, you won't ever be able to use your hand without pain again if you don't have a medic look at it sometime in the near future and I'm otherwise occupied. That was a blatant lie. His hand would only ache for a few days whether he received treatment or not. Fugaku snorted. I ignored him. Kichiro-kun, if you can, please stop using the Kyuubi's chakra. The change in your appearance is quite disconcerting. Kagami said once Fugaku walked away. Kagami drew a katana so I could see my reflection. I frowned, studying the small transformations. I hadn't been able to get a good look at them before. It was much more controlled than I ever remembered Naruto's early transformations being, but then again, I had the Kyuubi's cooperation. I was barely channeling any of the Kyuubi's chakra, just enough to augment my senses and help with the healing process, but it made my eyes resemble a fox's, even in the way they reflected the light, and sharpened my teeth. My nails were sharper, sturdier, and curved, like a fox's. I was reasonably sure I could fix the severe bruising of my organs without the Kyuubi's help, so I slowly released the chakra and watched my eyes fade back to their normal green. Thank you, Kagami let out a relieved sigh. I looked up at him and noticed his Sharingan fade. Why does everyone think I'm about to lose control? I've already told you the Kyuubi agreed to work with me. They fear my name, as they should. Yes, but the Kyuubi isn't known for its benevolence. Yeah, well, Kushina isn't known for her patience, but she can still sit down and study when it suits her purposes. Fair, but do you trust her leave her birthday present on the table and untampered with for a week? I grumbled an unintelligible response. Without warning, Kagami lifted me into his arms and carried me into the house. After a minute, he propped me against one of the walls with a blanket over me. Once settled, I closed my eyes to concentrate on the healing. Healing myself was tedious, and considering the adults had their party in full swing, I decided it wasn't worth moving. If I had pegged Kagami right, I would probably wake up to a prank, but I didn't care. When I did wake up, it was nearly morning and someone had put a pillow under my head. The house was quiet, which felt strange. A few feet away, Jiraiya had fallen asleep on a futon and Tsunade was collapsed beside him. In an adjacent room, low voices were conversing. I took off my vest, disgusted by the smell of blood. Silently, I stood up and crept towards the voices. When I reached the door, I paused, listening. Without a break in the conversation, the door opened. I flinched out of the way as the sudden light blinded me. The Hokage motioned me inside. So, what do you think? Kagami asked me. About what? This. He pointed at the table where papers were piled with one on top at which he was pointing. It was one of mine. It's my seal. Yes, but do you think it can seal the Hachibi? No. Why? Because it would barely seal a single tael's worth of the Kyuubi's chakra. What? Kagami squawked. How much chakra are we talking about here? How am I supposed to quantify chakra? Good point. In comparison to the average shinobi, how much chakra are we talking about? It would take approximately 16 individuals, probably more, with the chakra capacity of the Uchiha in front of you to equal the amount of chakra the Hachibi possesses. The Kyuubi says it would take about 16 times the amount of chakra you have to rival the Hachibi. Are you sure you can trust that? Go ask the Raikage to confirm it. He's fought the Hachibi, right? Kagami swore and punched the table. The Shiki Fujin would seal it up without a problem. I can count on my fingers the number of people capable of using that seal, and the village can't afford to lose any of them, the Hokage rebuked. You said you were capable of sealing the Hachibi. Of the seals in your notes, this one was the most likely to succeed. If not this seal, then which one? Seal 207. Yeah, what does that mean? My organization system was in English, so I wasn't surprised they had no idea what I was talking about. It's a numbering system, the Hokage concluded. I scowled. Yes. What you're looking at there is a modification of the seal Tsunade uses to store chakra in her forehead. It wouldn't be able to hold the Ichibi. Where's the one you're talking about? I shuffled the papers until I found the proper seal. The organization was certainly not how I left it, but it didn't take me long to find. This one. I slapped it down on top. The Hokage leaned over it, studying the seal. I noticed Sakumo sitting on the kitchen counter a few feet away. His knowledge of seals was extremely limited, thus, he didn't participate much in the discussion. What do you think? Kagami asked the Hokage. Apparently, he didn't read seals very well either. For that matter, I was extremely slow at reading and writing seals as well, but I could probably read all but the most complex of seals. Kushina read seals better than she read kanji. Minato read kanji better than both of us, though my comprehension was much better than either of theirs on both counts. The Hokage pointed at a section of the seal which used one of the secret Uzumaki aspects of sealing. I leaned over it, trying to remember what I intended with that particular section of the matrix. Very clever, little rat. Would you stop calling me a rat, please? When you stop looking like hairless vermin. You need lessons in politeness. It's just a stability factor, I concluded, ignoring the QB's mocking. The dead space in that section of the seal as well as the dead space in several other sections made the seal unbalanced, and if I tried to apply it, it would have unraveled, which would have been bad, obviously. You shouldn't have this dead space in seals. I shrugged. It works. It's dangerous. Actually, if you're prone to overloading seals, it makes it safer. How did you learn sealing so quickly? It took me nearly a decade to get to the point where I could make my own seals. Yeah, well, I wasn't splitting my attention between 100 projects, it was just this and medic training. Kushina taught me after I managed to memorize the first dozen or so base matrices. Even the Uzumaki take more than 2 years to learn sealing at this level. According to Kushina, it took her nearly 4 years to get to this point. I spoke 3 languages and was literate in 2, plus I could read music, albeit slowly. Picking up what equated to a 4th language wasn't difficult. I just shrugged in answer. I like puzzles. Creating seals is like making my own puzzles, making my own story. It's interesting. It took me a couple hundred tries to reach that point there, but I figured it out in the end. Why does any of this matter? You failed to put an understanding of Fuinjutsu in your personnel file. It took me nearly a year of specified study to make that seal. I wouldn't call that an understanding of anything. Stop looking at me like that. You're still willing to seal the Hachibi with this? No, but I don't have a choice. The QB made sealing the Hachibi one of the conditions for continued cooperation. You said one of your goals was freeing the Biju. I rolled my eyes. That's going to be quite the process, of which the QB is mostly going to be in charge, and until everyone can agree to play nicely, they're going to stay in timeout. Unless you want me to head to all the villages and start releasing Biju. Then I wholeheartedly agree, and let's just go smash the other villages with their own supposed weapons. When do I leave? We are sticking with the original plan to bring Kumo to heel and give a warning to the other nations. As soon as we stick the agreement on the rakeage, I want you to update your file. You would never have gone to the front lines if I knew both you and your sister were budding Fuinjutsu prodigies. Might as well lump Minato into that category as well. At least he was honest about his abilities. You still haven't told anyone who you learned from or from what books you're learning from. No, I haven't. I don't intend to. You can't make me. End of story. I was a frustrating little bastard and I liked it. I never thought I'd say this, but you could learn a thing or two from him about stubbornness, Hiruzen. Kagami chuckled. That's enough. Someone's getting touchy, fine. I rolled my eyes and turned to leave, uninterested. Where are you going? The Hokage grabbed a fistful of the back of my shirt. To go see what I can do for Minato and Kushina. Tsunade has already seen to them and they're being kept sedated until we can figure out how to help them mentally when they wake up. I can. You have a responsibility to this village first. There. They can wait. If need be, I will order you to comply. I felt anger rising in my chest, cutting off my voice. I jerked myself free. Then give the damn order, don't threaten it. I continued walking away. I wasn't sure if the Hokage was bluffing or not, but I was going to call him on it anyways and let him fight with his own morality. I opened the door. Uzumaki Kichiro, I order you to remain with me until you have fulfilled your immediate obligation to this village by assisting and facilitating the peace negotiations with Uzushiogakure. The order settled on my shoulders with the weight of a block of concrete. For a long minute, I seriously considered trying to defy the order. I compromised by turning around and grabbing the seal, then leaving anyways. They'd figure out where I was going soon enough. Chapter 17. I waited outside the Hokage tower for about 5 minutes, glaring at the ground. When the Hokage strode up, he grabbed my arm and hauled me into the building. Basement, he snapped. 20 minutes. Without another word, he left me in front of a restroom and shoved a bundle of clean clothing into my arms. I got the hint and cleaned myself up, mostly by scrubbing away the blood crusted under my fingernails and washing my face and rinsing my hair. After a second of contemplation, I sealed my dirty clothes into a scrap of paper I found in my pocket. The trek down to where the QB was sealed inside of me didn't seem nearly as long as it did the first time. My ears popped 4 times on the way down. The Hokage waited for me at the bottom of the steps, smoking his pipe. Do not speak unless spoken to, he murmured, then led the way forward. I sulked after him. One of the ANBU opened the door for us. I hesitated for the briefest of seconds. The ANBU's mask was blank except for the village symbol plastered across it. After a moment of concentration, I recognized Kagami's chakra signature. He winked at me. Good luck, he signed. I managed to pass the recognition off as an acknowledgement and entered the room. It didn't seem as big as I remembered it. The seals on the walls of the room glowed, clearly active. Once he determined exactly who was visiting, the Raikage stood up laboriously, with no visible restraints. His head was held high and his gaze full of challenge. The door closed behind us. I leaned against the wall beside it while the Hokage strolled forward, still pulling on his pipe, to stand a few feet in front of the Raikage, who was more than a foot taller and twice as broad. "Hey," the Hokage greeted amicably. "Sarutobi," the Raikage responded cautiously. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough." "Release my men." "That depends on the agreement we reach." "You have me." "Release them." "You really do care about nothing but your men." Here I thought it was an exaggeration. "Don't toy with me, you coward. Your men are as well as can be expected. Our methods of extracting information are not so crude that you need worry about them returning permanently injured. Kumo had nothing to do with the torture of those 2 genin. I'd gladly slaughter your village's future, but I would never pointlessly torture them." The Hokage held up a placating hand. "I am perfectly aware. What do you want?" A thin scroll appeared in the Hokage's hand. "Not much." The Raikage took it and slowly unrolled it. The Nibi and its Jinchuriki, all Kumo resources directed against Kiri, and a non-aggression pact in exchange for the secure sealing of the Hachibi. And the safe return of all prisoners on both sides. The Hokage smirked. I won't fight your battles for you. You don't have a choice. I won't give up one of my people and a future shinobi to you, nor will I hand over the Nibi. Again, you have no choice. The Raikage glared. Then you can keep me here and let me rot. I will not hand over. The Hokage raised a hand. The door beside me opened and Kagami, still dressed as the ANBU, shuffled in a Kumo prisoner. I kept my face carefully neutral. The Raikage lunged forward, but a barrier stopped him dead in less than a step. Your men mean absolutely nothing to me. They are currently enemies who deserve no mercy. I don't believe you can watch your men tortured to death in front of you. Kagami slowly took off his mask. Nice to see you again, Raikage-sama. Our last meeting didn't end on the best of terms, and I apologize for not breaking under your torture or having the decency to die when ordered. No hard feelings? Bastard, the Raikage snarled, and my curiosity made me stand a bit straighter. You Konoha nin are harder to kill than cockroaches. The Hokage chuckled. I'll let you think my offer over with your head, Jonin. Kagami crouched and placed a seal at the Kumo Jonin's feet and backed away, leaving the man's hands tied. Uzumaki-kun will remain here. He is capable of answering any questions you may have pertaining to the Biju. These are the best terms you will be offered. He's nothing more than a child playing dress-up. I wasn't aware you were a guest here. Kagami responded sarcastically. The Raikage punched the barrier in a burst of anger. The Hokage and Kagami left, leaving me leaning against the wall. Don't even consider it, the Jonin growled. He's not bluffing. We swore. My decision's final. The council. I'll deal with the council. You'll... Enough. Uzumaki, how does Konoha propose to seal the Hachibi? I will accompany you to a specified site and choose from a list of candidates in which to seal the Hachibi, perform the sealing, and return with the Nibi. How do we know you'll keep your word? I don't have a choice. I lifted my forehead protector so he could see the seal. It's called the Shitago. I am incapable of disobeying a direct order from the Hokage. If you hear the order, you know it will be obeyed. When will the sealing occur? Whenever the Hokage releases me from the village. What seal will be used? One of my own. You're a kid. I scowled. Welcome to Konoha, where only yours truly gives a damn about age. Besides, it's wartime, our normal rules about age have been all but thrown out the window. Do you have any more questions, or can I go? I have better things to do. Tell Sarutobi I agree to his demands. Is that all? I would appreciate something to eat. I nodded and left. Straight face. After delivering the message to the Hokage in the form of a note passed through one of the shinobi entering the building to report directly to the Hokage, I went to the hospital. Since I was in uniform, as a medic I had free range in the building. It took me 2 minutes to locate Minato in the pediatric ward, and another 30 seconds to find Kushina in the shinobi recovery ward. It took me the rest of the day to reach them. Something bad happened and the shinobi section was overflowing with new arrivals. After helping with 3 emergency surgeries, I found myself unable to walk past the injured. I probably skewed the system slightly, overworked doctors appearing, only to find their patients had already been patched up and were waiting to be discharged. It was a harmless and somewhat productive prank I enjoyed playing, especially since the civilian doctors hadn't caught me yet and none of the medics had squealed. There was one doctor who hated paperwork more than anything. On my days off when I couldn't find anything better to do, I would commission the help of the career genin receptionist. They were actually one of the hospital's only visible guards, and target that particular doctor by healing all of her patients before she could get to them and making her do nothing but discharge patients and paperwork for most of the day. The ensuing shouting and cursing at thin air was hilarious. When I finally made it to Kushina, she was just waking up. One of the nurses had propped her up with pillows. She just stared listlessly at the small hospital meal in front of her. "Kushina?" I asked cautiously as I sat down on the bed beside her. She didn't respond, but her hand went to her abdomen where I stabbed her to get to the kunoichi holding her hostage. "Kushina-chan?" I tried again, taking her hand in mine. "Minato's dead, isn't he?" "No!" I exclaimed. "He's going to be fine." "Then why'd they take him?" she wailed. Her head fell into her hands and she started sobbing. "He was right beside me, I promised I wouldn't let go, and then he was gone." I quickly put my arms around her. "He's fine, Kushina-chan. I know exactly where he is, okay?" I ran my fingers through her hair, a motion that always seemed to calm her down when she was upset. Suddenly, she shrieked and jerked away from me. The attending nurses came running and one pulled me away while two of them held her down. This only seemed to set her off more than anything, and the tray flew off the bed. Escaping the grip of a nurse experienced with restraining shinobi was a bit harder than I expected, especially while shouting for them to let her go before someone got hurt. I had to resort to a Jonin-level maneuver I saw Sakumo perform when he found himself in a tight spot on the IWA border. He would probably beat me senseless if he knew I attempted it, but I only cared about getting Kushina to snap out of whatever flashback she was trapped in. When I landed on the foot of the bed and brandished my sticks, the nurses quickly jerked out of the way. As soon as they released her, she stopped screaming and scrambled backwards, staring straight ahead, her eyes flashing to every movement, but not quite seeing anything. Dancing bears, painted wings, things I almost remember, and a song someone sings, Once Upon a December, I found myself singing softly. It was in English, the first thing that came into my head. One of my army buddies had a kid with some kind of disorder that had the poor child curled in a corner whenever certain stimulus appeared. Either he or his wife would always crouch beside the girl and sing the song to calm her down. Someone holds me safe and warm, horses prance through a silver storm. Kushina stilled. I moved slowly as I sat down and crossed my legs. Figures dancing gracefully across my memory. Her eyes finally focused on me. Someone holds me safe and warm, horses prance through a silver storm. Figures dancing gracefully across my memory. I couldn't remember any of the rest, so I just repeated the song from beginning. Dancing bears, painted wings, things I almost remember. Kushina lunged forward and I resisted the urge to flinch out of the way as she wrapped her arms around my neck and curled against my chest, seeming much smaller than she actually was. And a song someone sings, Once Upon a December. Someone holds me safe and warm, horses prance through a silver storm. Figures dancing gracefully across my memory. Gingerly, I wrapped my arms around her and held as still as I possibly could. Someone holds me safe and warm, horses prance through a silver storm. Figures dancing gracefully across my memory. Nissan, I still see them, her breath caught, and after a moment she was sobbing into my neck. They're dead, but they're still there. I know. Please make them go away, Nissan. My arms tightened around her, but I knew better than to make a promise I could never keep without turning her life into a lonely hell. I love you, Kushina-chan. You can always tell me anything. I don't want to hurt you too. Kushina, there's nothing you can say or do that could hurt me, okay? I'm your big brother and the only thing that hurts me is when you get hurt. I want this war to be over. I don't want to be scared anymore. Where's Minato? Is he okay? He's sleeping, Jiraiya's voice answered as I opened my mouth. There were complications with the treatment, so he needs to be actively supervised as a precaution. He'll be perfectly fine in time. I want to see for myself. Jiraiya stepped into our line of sight and looked at me for an answer. I held up a hand so Kushina could see it glowing with medical ninjutsu. She nodded her permission and I laid a hand gently on her forehead. Physically, she was fine, if a little battered and sore, but she was obviously kept in the hospital for waking up panicking, most likely more than once. The hospital knew better than to release ninja, even genin, to the streets, especially genin without ninja guardians. They had done their best to keep her unconscious simply because the hospital didn't have the manpower to help her and she wasn't important enough in the war effort to reassign someone. If ISE and Fuso were already working in the hospital, they wouldn't be allowed in the shinobi section without direct supervision, not with open chakra networks. "I'll take you," I finally decided. Kushina didn't move. "Nissan? Can you carry me? I don't want to see them on the way there." "Sure." I pulled the top blanket off the bed and wrapped it tightly around her from her shoulders to her knees. The hospital gown was a little breezy, even though she wore a pair of shorts beneath it. I sat her on the edge of the bed to scribble a note on her file to keep her off duty indefinitely. "Nissan?" she asked as I initialed the order, hugging the blanket tightly around herself. "What is it?" "I have to go to the bathroom." "Okay, there's one just down the hall." I picked her up and she tucked her face into my neck. To a normal kid my age, she would have been quite heavy, considering she weighed nearly as much as me, but as a shinobi, I could carry Jiraiya with no problem beyond the awkwardness. I stopped in front of the bathroom door and Kushina hesitated before taking her own weight. She stared at the door like it was a haunted closet. I opened it and showed her there was no one inside. "I'll stand right here and make sure no one comes in." She nodded. 2 minutes later, the door behind me opened and Kushina leapt onto my back. I staggered forward and nearly crashed into the opposite wall at the unexpected force. Patting her knee reassuringly, I continued to the pediatric ward. Since I was a kid, most people assumed I would be the best with kids, which was a flawed assumption, but I learned to turn treatment into a game anyways. Because of my age, everyone seemed to know me by name. "Kairo-sensei." Several kids greeted from the dining room. I smiled and waved, but didn't stop to chat. Kushina's arms tightened around my neck as if someone was about to pull her away. I slipped one hand into hers and stopped at the end of the hall to scan the room assignments. Minato might have been in pediatric care, but he was still a ninja and they tended to separate the genin from the other children for safety reasons. To my surprise, Minato had been placed in a room with 3 very familiar names, Inoichi, Shikaku, and Choza. "You alright, Kushina?" I asked cautiously as I set her on her feet, my hand on the doorknob. She nodded cautiously and locked her grip around my arm. I knocked twice on the door and received quiet permission to enter. Of the 4 boys in the room, only 2 were truly conscious, and only one mostly mobile. A very thin Choza sat in a chair beside Inoichi, awkwardly playing a card game with one hand. The other arm was immobilized against his bare chest. "Kichiro-san," Inoichi greeted as I entered first. The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted it and groaned, holding his side, his cards spilling. "Let me guess, someone decided your ribs weren't functioning properly while solid and pulverized them in a misguided attempt to rectify the problem." Inoichi and Choza laughed, but Inoichi quickly stopped, moaning in pain. "Sorry, I guess I'm not supposed to make you laugh." I pulled Kushina in behind me. Both boys' eyes widened in horror when they caught sight of Kushina clinging to me. I subtly shook my head, telling them not to comment. As far as I knew, neither had much contact with her, but they were only a year older than me and had spent a year in the academy with Kushina, even if they weren't in her class. From the confiscated materials in the corner of the room, all 3 were already chunin and had seen the front lines. Their next words confirmed that. "The rumors are true," Choza murmured. "You really are the famous spirit, or infamous depending on your point of view. Can you really work miracles?" "I think Inoichi could use one. Shikaku as well." "No, not miracles," I answered, guiding Kushina over to sit in the chair beside Minato's bed. Jiraiya wandered over to distract them and I lowered my voice so only Kushina could hear. "See? I said softly, guiding her hands into Minato's. He'll be just fine, okay? She pulled the blanket away from his chest to reveal where the civilian doctors had been forced to open up the boy's chest to repair the bone and cartilage pulverized by the kunai. I had only stopped the bleeding and repaired the bare minimum. Bone took ages to heal and used more chakra than I had been willing to risk on someone who wouldn't have been able to fight. He would have an impressive scar to show for it and would be laid up for the next few months. I wasn't going to lift a finger to change that. If he was down, it would keep Kushina off duty alongside him, though the fact I was sure Jinin were guarding the hospital instead of the invisible Chunin generally on duty, I figured she'd be incorporated into that group as soon as she was cleared, which was unlikely if her hollow gaze was anything to go by. Considering that fact, my file somehow had me flagged as a serious flight risk and I was technically on suicide watch, which I had no idea how that happened. I wasn't the slightest bit suicidal. They wouldn't let her near any sharp or pointy objects for quite some time, just to be extra safe. Yes, I had mostly inadvertently benched Minato and Kushina. I didn't regret it. The two of them were little more than children and had been dragged far out of their depth simply by who their team leader happened to be, then found themselves stuck on the ocean floor when I made a name for myself. Most everything now flew over their heads, and it was only a matter of time before they drowned. I made a mental note to flag Sakumo as a suicide risk if his wife died or he failed a mission. I need to get stronger, Nisan. I sat down in the chair beside her and cautiously put an arm around her shoulders. You're already strong, Kushina-chan, much stronger than anyone else I know. I placed one hand over her heart. You're strong where it matters. My words didn't have the effect I wanted. She burst into tears. But I'm not, Nisan. When they caught me that time, I wanted to die, it hurt so much. I knew how much it would hurt you and Minato, but I didn't seek care. I glanced at Jiraiya. He was watching us carefully out of the corner of his eye. I suddenly felt extremely thankful for the years I spent as a CNO while she cried onto my shoulder. I saw those kunai first. I should have taken them, not Minato. He wasn't hurt, he could have fought. I'm not strong, Nisan. I sighed. Kushina-chan, you're not weak. When you were captured, your response was perfectly normal. She only started to cry harder. Minato nearly died. I was still awake when we got to the hospital and they were shouting all sorts of stuff and it sounded really bad. He's going to be fine, Kushina. Stop it! She sobbed, clinging to my vest. If it wasn't for me, Minato would never have been connected to you. He wouldn't have been caught if he hadn't tried to protect me and I hadn't yelled threats at them. If I had done something, he wouldn't be just lying there. Hey! I shifted so I could look directly at her. She remained clinging to me, her face hidden in my shoulder. Hey, look at me. She shook her head. Kushina, look at me, I ordered. Sniffling, she pulled away but didn't look up. Look at me, I said firmly. Finally, she looked up, even if she couldn't lift her eyes above my collar. I figured it was the best I was going to get. Kushina, you are not responsible. It isn't you. It just means you're sick, okay? You're just sick and you're going to get better, okay? She burst into tears and hid her face back in my shoulder. I wasn't sure if I helped or just made everything worse. It hurts, she hiccuped. I know, Kushina-chan, I know. At a loss, I just put my arms around her and let her cry. When Inoichi passed out during Jiraiya and Chose's conversation, the two left politely, even though I could still hear them in the hallway. Eventually, Kushina cried herself to sleep while I hummed half-forgotten tunes. At some point, I nodded off, only to wake when Jiraiya returned. He took the chair from beside Inoichi's bed and sat down on Minato's other side, pulling out an empty notebook and a pencil. Did Choza-san go to the dining room? I asked. Discharged to his mother, who just returned from a mission. A long silence ensued, woven with Jiraiya's constant fidgeting. "You don't have to stay," I told him when the rustling began to annoy me. "Yes, I do," he answered quietly. "I failed them and I can't let them suffer the consequences alone." "You're not responsible either." "No, but I still have a responsibility to them." "And if you're needed on the front lines again?" "Then I'll make sure they'll be fine without me." I laid my head on Kushina's. "I managed to get my hands on Sensei's copy of your file, the comprehensive one." I didn't particularly care, so I didn't answer. "I'm curious as to why you make a habit of insulting the leadership of this village." It wasn't a question, so I didn't even bother reacting. "Not very talkative, are you? If you want information from or about me, just ask." "Very well. Tell me when I'm wrong." Uzumaki Kichiro, 9 years old, Chunin. Technically, I was mentally 29, but I suppose he was still correct. "You spent the first 7 years of your life in Uzushiogakure." Technically, it was Maryland, a few miles outside of DC, but he was taking about Kichiro, so it was still legit. "You were forced to flee the village with 7 other children a little more than a month after your birthday." 8. There were 8 other kids. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow but otherwise ignored my comment. "Shortly after you were settled in the village as a refugee, you were placed in the academy to become a shinobi for Konoha. While you showed the intelligence and physical capacity for a ninja career in the pre-academy questionnaire, you displayed exceptional maturity and hinted at an unnaturally well-developed sense of morality that objected to participating in the profession." Well, now I knew the purpose of all those questions before I joined the other students. As such, Hatake Sakumo was tasked with covertly discerning the extent of your moral code and whether it could be broken to create a shinobi. Well, I played right into Sakumo's hands. You were offered an apprenticeship and utilized the liberties it gave you to attempt to become the first male medic nin in village history. Seriously? No other guy ever tried to be a medic? Jiraiya chuckled. "A handful have tried from an intellectual standpoint, but none succeeded. I thought everyone was more hung up on the age than the gender. Kid, you're a genius, even though you reject the title. I'm an adult being judged by standards set to children. Not even my genius teammate picked up a subject as fast as you mastered aerial ninjutsu." I rolled my eyes. "I'm not sure about your last 2 statements, but go on. My history from another's point of view is more interesting than I thought." Supposedly, while you were training to become a medic, time you were supposedly studying academy materials were spent learning Fuinjutsu, under the assumption you would become the Kyuubi Jinchuriki in the case of Uzumaki Mito's death. I was a bit more than certain that the Kyuubi would eventually be sealed inside of me than an assumption would connote, but he was still technically correct. While you were simultaneously learning 2 subjects that should generally take several years of intensive study, you spent 4 to 5 days a week training with Hatake Sakumo as his apprentice, and passing off original seals as gifts from your sister. Actually, any seals I used in a spar were Kushina's. Any seals she happened to use in a spar in front of adults were mine. Sakumo had rightfully thought Kushina to be a budding Fuinjutsu prodigy, and the Chunin teachers assumed Kushina's seals had come from Sakumo. No one cared enough to look into the issue. I obviously didn't care when someone made an inaccurate assumption. During your time as Hatake's student, you excelled in chakra control, balance, strength, agility, flexibility, and intuition, characteristics that would make you a perfect fit for any taijutsu style, which Hatake capitalized on by teaching you several radically different styles, all of which you picked up with surprising ease. What could I say? Physical training was fun when I could ease or even altogether turn off the pain associated with it, though I didn't dare tell anyone that was what I was doing. Your skills in other areas were puzzling. You showed almost no aptitude for throwing kunai and shuriken. Because I didn't care to stick people with sharp pointy things. Yet, when introduced to Senbon, you excelled. Because the fact that the chances of Senbon accidentally causing a mortal wound, or even a dangerous wound, were slim to none. Not even a direct hit to the aorta would cause anything but a little bit of bleeding, and the style of senbon I used were too light and thin to go through bone unless I really wanted them to. The worst damage I could do was take out someone's eye or cause a hell of a lot of pain. If I wanted to, I could paralyze someone's vocal cords, and with a little bit of luck, I could put someone into a near-death state for an indefinite period of time. Several annoying academy students had mysteriously lost their voices for a week when I heard them cussing up a storm and picking on a trio of little civilian girls. Sakumo somehow, I didn't want to know the details, wrangled a Jinin team into becoming practice dummies shortly after I started sparring with the academy students. I managed to knock one of them out shortly before noon, and they stayed out until the next morning when I declared the experiment to be over and woke them up. Jiraiya wasn't finished. Hatake was faced with pressure from the majority of Konoha's leadership to test how well you would do in both ninjutsu and jinjutsu. That was unexpected. Sakumo hadn't been at all forthcoming about anything he did outside of our occasional meetings and regular training sessions. I had assumed that Sakumo's relationship with the Hokage was a bit distant, but I was obviously wrong. Even with that pressure and a few threats, Hatake continued to insist on waiting. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that he gave a specific date to begin your training in ninjutsu, you would have been transferred to a different jonin. I snorted. That would not have gone over well. It still won't. I probably would have refused to train until Sakumo was reinstated. Then again, I was fairly sure issues with authority had been in my file from the beginning. It was probably changed to severe issues with authority following Kushina's kidnapping, but I was strangely proud of it. Does that mean you would be unwilling to work under a different captain? I thought for a moment. Depends on who that captain is. Do you have anyone in mind? I hummed. Maybe Tsunade, but I doubt there's room for a puny little chunin like me on your team. Anyone else? I don't know all that many people right now. I'd know plenty of people in the future, but a vast majority of the main characters hadn't even been born yet. I suppose I did know tons of people from the war fronts, but I only knew them in passing, and names were rarely included, unless they were stupidly powerful jonin everyone knew anyways. What about Kato Dan? Why do you mention him specifically? Jiraiya shrugged. He's one of the primary candidates for the next Hokage. I knew the future Sannin was trying to gauge my reaction, but I didn't give him one. Then again, I should probably reassure everyone that it wasn't authority that I had a problem with, but certain authority figures. I met him briefly on the Kumo border. Decent man and likes medics. Guarded me himself while I worked so my team could get some real rest, which probably saved our lives the day we left the base. Honestly, I liked the man. He was more willing than anyone else I'd ever met in this world to engage in ethical discussions, and unlike Sakumo, he hardly ever used the traditional village dogma, or even the dogma of the shinobi world in general, to back up his claims. We had a nice debate while I steadily worked through their triage system and almost completely healed all but 3 of their injured. Even though I probably should have rested, he didn't object when I moved on to the advanced triage patients. He went so far as to sincerely thank me after I managed to save 2 of the 3, right before he knocked me out with a sleeping jutsu that didn't wear off for a good 15 hours. The next time I saw him, I planned to give him a hard time for it, but I held no hard feelings towards him, which surprised me. Jiraiya scowled. What? You don't like him? I hate the whelp. You're an ass. I suppose the only reason you don't like him is because Tsunade gives him the time of day she denies you. You are 9. How the hell do you pick up on something like that? He was wearing the Shodai's necklace when I met him, and I happen to be the only medic allied with this village willing to heal your Tsunade-inflicted injuries. That's because I'm pretty sure you're the only male in this village who's not the slightest bit scared of her. I chuckled. That's because I'm not perverted. That'll change, kiddo, trust me. No, I don't think it will, I murmured to myself, lost in memory, my eyes closed. That's the end of this tale for now. If you enjoyed the story, like the video and subscribe if you'd like. Anyways, with that being said, see you next time. Peace.